Thanks for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons, where we create interactive audio dramas where the listener can also become part of the show by creating a character and submitting actions. What we're about to present is a dramatic, epic, and exciting outcome of all the actions submitted by members of our community who are not only spectators, but also players waiting to see the result of their decisions. Win or lose, your character is making history. If you enjoy the content we're making, then maybe consider liking, subscribing, and following our station Peoplz and Dragons on Anchor.fm, now streaming on all major podcast platforms. But before we begin, I would like to thank the patrons. I very much appreciate your support. Let's continue. Haven City. An ugly city. Act 2. The Edge of Madness. Frozen Alta District buildings and homes glow orange as its iconic winding roads remain occupied by those who rally for peace, love, and acceptance for Haven's displaced guests, the migrants of Anvil. Alta has become home to a specific species of intelligent avian aliens named the Nguvu, whom, through wrecked with severe amnesia, their cultural coherence has been revitalized by the acts of the Phoenix and the Manticore Rebellion. The Nguvu have become more aware of their entitlements due to highly effective social campaigns called Under Our Wing, heralded by one of their boldest political leaders, Ambassador Infano Inwe, who we see depicted in the Nguvu street arts and whose name is leveraged in bold messages in the spirit of the movement. The Featherfall Commune and all who support the migrants continually hold their ground, protected by strengthened numbers, as well as 1,000 Haven Guard troops to protect them from those who oppose, which were many. On the outer rim of the Featherfall rally, we see about 50 or so soldiers of the Hyperion advance, spectating ominously bitter. They wanted the migrants out of Haven and felt powerless in the shadow of the Phoenix and Haven Guard. The same could not be said for all of Haven, however. We cut to many different parts of Haven City and see violence and war between aggressors on both sides fighting and defending their beliefs no matter how skewed they were. Car bombs, gun violence, street brawls, and all-out faction warfare broke out as the Hyperion advancement, led by Avalon Hyperion himself, an influential icon, spreads his message that was not one of hate, but of logic. Haven City was too vulnerable and fragile to allow alien and refugees to live among them. It wasn't feasible, and many others felt the same but were too scared to voice their beliefs, at least until they met Avalon. Avalon was a G-type who naturally emitted a field of truth, rendering those around him to not only speak the pure truth, but also embrace their own feelings. Several celebrities, politicians, and influencers have crossed paths, resulting in their allegiance with his views, but ultimately remaining a minority compared to those waving the flags of Haven Guard. We see Rezanok standing on the wreckage of a Hyperion Jeep surrounded by his people, awaiting his direction. This Rezanok was different than what we've come to know of him. We don't know what happened after his soul was relinquished from the abyss, but what we can surmise is that he's found and latched on to some purpose. Perhaps coping with the loss of his loved ones, filling a void. Whatever it may be, the people are lucky he wasn't the monster he once was. We flash back to a fiendishly out-of-control Rezanok impaled upon the blade of a young Venryu Sayali, his eyes churning with red, raging light just before she severs him in half, freeing his spirit from his abyssal vessel. We cut back to Rezanok, more tame and handsome than usual. He clears the long brown hair from his face, then raises his fist triumphantly, triggering his fellow migrants to cheer as news helicopters circle him, collecting news coverage of the migrants' progress. Tempest watches the news intently. He was concerned. It's been quite some time, but he recognized Reznak as the young genius from his short stint as a contractor at Gate. Something was odd about him, and with the dulling of Tempest's empathic senses, though it wasn't as vivid as before, he still felt something lurked inside that kid. A tan emerald-eyed sword mage walks up beside Tempest and leans in. It's high time someone did something about the unfairness in this city. Arnavek Trildex, or Arn for short, was a Gate ally who has lent himself and his blade to the cause. As a migrant himself, he wanted nothing more than for Haven to be his new home and wanted the same for his Anvil comrades. Arn, however, labeled the Phoenix movement toxic and a large natural component to the civil unrest. Tempest couldn't agree more. It was only a matter of time before Reznak snaps like how he did at the training center way back when. A ticking time bomb. Tempest had no idea of Reznak's journey since they've last met. His concerns were justified. However, no one, not even us, knew which Reznak we were getting this time. We need to hurry and establish a structure before this turns into an outright war. Arnavek agrees. He nods and informs Tempest of Syrian's success in gathering prospect leaders suitable for the Senate of Haven Lords, and hands him the docket. Tempest knew that it was going to take more than one righteous leader to save the planet, let alone Haven City. He proceeds to project the data onto the holotable before them, and we see several iconic figureheads from all over the city spring up and above the table. Among them, we see live footage of Alta's Nguvu ambassador Mfano Enwe reciting the Anvil Accords to what mainly could be classified as a pro-Hyperion district, a bold yet dangerous task, but when backed by his commune and with all under one wing, politically, Mfano was a force to be reckoned with. We also see a large brindle bull of a Tarasen athlete whose celebrity status was larger than life. Coming off of a fresh victory, cinching a widely televised Blitz Match championship, Xavier Ortiz's parade was cut short when the death of a loved one amidst the Hyperion migrant skirmish sent him spiraling down a path of social justice. Riding the wave of support and colossal sponsorships, Xavier has rallied all of the Tarasanos of the Divergent District behind him and proceeds to bring them to relevancy so Havenites can learn a thing or two about honor from lost Tarasanos traditions. Arnavek retrieves a holo card from his satchel and shows it to Tempest. On it, we see a still image of Xavier wrestling a large beast to the ground, its head locked within Xavier's rock-hard biceps. Value of this card goes up about 1,500 bizquirks for every beast that he beasts. Tempest was impressed, but immediately cycles through the rest of the leaders of Haven, most of which have been mysteriously assassinated over the last month or so, with little evidence tied to Avalon Hyperion. Tempest stops on one last individual whose work has deeply affected the livelihood of society. We see the Dizzy Wizard, looking as magnetic and captivating as ever, parading around the city in what appears to be more propaganda and an ad acting as a call to action to oppose the Hyperion advance in favor of yet more Dizzy Whiz Fizz candy. Donning some swanky teal sunglasses, the wizard rolls out a new candy product supplemented by a catchy insult aimed toward Avalon in response to his attacks on the Dizzy brand. Lowering his shades, we see a sparkle in his handsome eyes as he tells Avalon to go suck on a popsicle. This insult is then magnified by Gamatuber Ali of Ali's World as she instigates as well as brings some major publicity to the politically charged popsicle-shaped Dizzy Whiz candy that naturally puts people in a more optimistic mood, a common byproduct of all of Dizzy's flavorful concoctions. Arnavek concludes that these leaders all have expressed their desire to make Haven a better place and all have agreed to meet Tempest today. Tempest adjusts his fedora and seems pleased. The Haven Lord Senate will be just what the city needs to suppress the cancer that is the Hyperion advance. Suddenly, a bunch of commotion stirs up during the live broadcast of Reznak's rally as two echoing gunshots clap in the air like lightning. Everyone dives to the ground, taking cover in fear of being shot dead. A young man pokes his head up and turns to look up at his fearless leader, Reznak, standing in place, stunned. With a large gaping hole in his chest and half of his skull blown off, Reznak looks shocked and delirious, still processing what has just occurred, as he sees standing before him his attacker with a smoking gun. They go to fire another shot for the head, but by then, Reznak had mutated and adapted, his flesh becoming an impenetrable alien metal that when the bullet hits, it reflects off of his forehead and directly back into the noggin of the shooter himself. This attack on the migrant leader has been broadcasted throughout the city, and most still can't believe it. Tempest watches, unsurprised, knowing the situation would come to this sooner than later. He turns to Arnavek with eyes of ambition and tells him to gather the leaders now. If they waited any longer, this civil unrest will break Haven beyond repair. Resources or not, Arnavek nods as a figure consisting of flaming black shadows appears looming over his shoulders with a cold embrace. Arn takes one step backward into the milky mass of shadow and disappears entirely. Tempest pulls out a picture of his adoptive daughter, Amelia, and clenches it close to his heart. We cut to Marshall Mesa, waiting patiently as the escaped Survey Day hostage, Oblivion, browses the Dizzy Whiz sugar truck menu. Its obnoxious, looping tune was enough to drive anyone mad, but Oblivion wasn't normal, and Marshall had the patience of a saint. Marshall has taken the lead on trying to reason and extract vital information from the young woman about the whereabouts of the Survey Day strongholds. With the most vital information repressed and buried under trauma and delusions, this task has become an ongoing session of therapy and babysitting. 20 minutes pass, and Oblivion still hasn't decided on what to get from the truck. With more and more parents and children crowding around, Marshall whispers over the phone to Jacob, who is checking in to see if Marshall learned anything new from the troubled girl. We see Jacob and the Haven Guard cruising through the city streets in various districts, searching for Survey Day cultists. Jacob complains to Marshall, "How hard can it be? She remembers or she doesn't." Marshall explains that she's a bit more complicated than that. Oblivion wants to see everything she's missed on the surface, so Marshall felt this would be a good way to trigger memories as opposed to stepping on a traumatic landmine with blunt and straightforward questions about her torturers. Marshall lets Jacob know that he'll update him when he gets more information and ends the call. Jacob sighs. And suddenly, then Ryusai Ali scoots over and plops next to him with her life dock hovering all up in his face. "That's right. Y'all, I told you. I'm with the leader of Haven Guard up in here. We ain't playing. Jacob, say hi." Ali's fans watch as she live streams the cult hunt. Jacob frowns and takes a swig of whiskey while swatting away the life dock. Jacob begins to regret letting Ali ride in his particular vehicle, but he appreciated her campaign against the Hyperion advance. He's even used her platform to speak his piece on the matter, but man, she was all over the place, and her bald head jokes were starting to hit a little different. "Hey Jacob, I really like what you've done with your hair. How did you get it to come out of your nostrils like that?" Ali's fans die of laughter. Ali pokes halfway out of the vehicle's roof hatch and begins taking selfies of herself making crazy faces, her legs kicking in all directions, and almost kicks Jacob in the head. "What have I done to deserve this?" Jacob thinks to himself. Ali stops carrying on when she notices in the background of one of her photos a tall, obscure humanoid figure. She looks closer, then peers back toward the block that they just passed, but saw nothing. Confused, she looks around, and before her very eyes, she sees the figure yet again, except again in passing. When passing it, it was like time itself slowed down as Ali makes full eye contact with the strange creature. Ali jumps back down into the truck, spooked. Jacob notices, but also notices she's quiet, and was quite okay with that, so he didn't bother. Oblivion stands in front of the sugar truck window, indecisive of her choice of treat to buy, when finally the whiz-fizz clerk breaks character, calls her a brat, and tells her to hurry the hell up. She's holding up the line. Oblivion, covered in layers of clothing, looks up at him angrily, revealing her gaunt, eyeless visage, startling him. Holy, what the fuck? Oblivion's hand mutates into a razor-sharp pincer, and she gets ready to strike the vehicle, but Marshall jumps in front of her and the truck and calms her down. He then takes one of everything and pays for it all in a few motions, then drags Oblivion away. Marshall turns around and gives the clerk a disappointed look and thinks maybe he'll encourage the wizard to replace his employees with candy people after all. He leaves the rude clerk to deal with the horde of angry, bickering parents. We cut to Marshall and Oblivion sitting on a park bench. She enjoys her fizzy popsicle, completely oblivious to all of the police sirens, helicopters, and commotion from the nearby gamma rift opening up in the center of an intersection. Marshall continues the day's work of progress, slowly, chipping away at her memory, delicately, patient. Oblivion, you mentioned seeing a large, scary, skeletal face when fleeing from the bad men. And you saw a blaze burning around this being's face, right? Oblivion stops licking. She recalls a flash of the image she once described, though this time more definitive, more clear, now that her nerves were calm. Its visage less terrifying and more illustrative with brick-like aesthetics. There was no fire, no blaze. She turns to Marshall and says, "Yes, but it was a wall with large art, large words." Marshall's eyes light up. Oblivion, were there trains nearby? Or cars? Oblivion tries hard to think. We see Oblivion fleeing up a ladder, being pursued by her attackers. Once reaching the top, the first thing she sees in her frantic delusion is a mural of a skeletal face with large black words written in graffiti, "Saw Blaze." Marshall stands up. The camera pans around his head as he rubs his temples. That's it! He realizes she is describing the Saw Blaze gang's hideous and traumatizing mural that's plastered on the walls within the mysterious abandoned service tunnels under the Frontier District, a peculiar location that he happens to know well, because the woman who delivers milk to Mason Mart is always complaining about the ghastly image when in transit. She'd take an alternate route if she could, but there were no alternates. Marshall pulls his teleslab from his pocket and shares the intel and location coordinates with Jacob and Haven Guard. He then looks over at Oblivion, who by now has dropped her ice cream on the ground and looks incredibly disturbed as she sees Avalon Hyperion on a big screen sharing his opinion on the assassination attempt of the migrant leader Rezanok. But what was more astonishing was that he was also parading around leaked audio and video, a clip of what could only be Gordon Gale, or as the world knows him, Tempest, co-signing Avalon's migrant blaming. In the obscure footage, we see Tempest sharing his true thoughts and feelings of the dangers of migrants running free in the ugly city. His voice, his mannerisms, and most importantly, his message was like a dagger through the chest. Damning evidence. Marshall's eyes widened. He too couldn't believe what he was seeing. Tempest tells the city that the migrants are led by a truly insane individual. The assassination of the said individual was orchestrated by his own people, thus a testament to their instability, savagery, and untrustworthiness. Tempest is then heard declaring that he is Haven Lord of the people, but only the people of Haven City. Avalon ends the clip, and then goes on to reveal that the culprit has been caught and will pay for her crimes. We then see the unnamed killer brought into custody, apprehended by Haven's new android police force, governed by Atlas. By now, the entire city is astounded by Tempest's polarizing stance as Haven Lord of the People. Avalon informs the city that Atlas's new police force is the force of the future. Androids who had no bias and who are unwavering in their vision for justice and peace for the Haven citizen. All around the city, we see all-black Atlas vehicles populating the streets as android officers begin to mobilize and enforce Avalon and Tempest's ideals. Marshall recalls the first time he thought Tempest betrayed the world and how he did nothing. Luckily, it was a farce, but this time, it was very clear that Tempest has turned his back on what it meant to uphold hope in the ugly city, and Marshall wasn't going to stand by and let it go any further. This city corrupts its inhabitants, and Tempest apparently wasn't beyond the darkness himself. Marshall grabs Oblivion and heads straight for the city's news broadcasting studio, where Avalon Hyperion was currently located. Hey, just want to take a moment again to thank the patrons, really. If you enjoy this kind of stuff and want to support us beyond just being here, then consider becoming a patron. The MetaPass tier gives you access to a behind-the-scenes video for every episode that I make, where I provide commentary on the meta and creation process for those who want to know why things happen the way they did. For example, why was Xavier Infano and Dizzy Wizard chosen to be the Haven Lord Synod? Or would you be interested in hearing about the alternate scene that I had written for Rezanok during the assassination portion? Stuff like that. It's interesting stuff, and some things are deeper than they seem. Anyway, thanks for listening. And thank you again to the patrons. Let's continue. We cut to the large Atlas A monument soaking up the sun on the coastal end of the Nebuhaven colonies. The people have become totally brainwashed by the Unity Atlas propaganda, and the majority of the people have begun working under Unity Atlas, contracts signed in blood. The propaganda was so well tailored toward the free-spirited and daring people of the colony that even those who chose to stick to their trade wrestled with the temptation of the Atlas luxuries promised in those damned contracts. The manipulation of memories by Jace Belaren's will, though aggressive, was a peaceful route, yet incredibly destructive to those being preyed on by large corporations with their own agenda. It just so happened Atlas's goals were just as much of a win for CEO Jeremiah Oliver, but also the world. This left man conflicted and disorganized. The colony leaders of yesterday were fractured, each off doing what they believed was the right action to take. The Honorable John Quill works with close allies on forging a treaty that will be utilized to come to an agreement with Atlas. They were in luck because within their colony was a young woman by the name of Vera Zima, who had the innate ability to identify the truth and separate it from deception. She was dying to contribute to the colony, leaping at the chance to rub shoulders with the Honorable John Sage Quill. In the attempt to form an official government for the colony, a demarchy, Vera Zima will ensure that the treaty is pulled through without any trickery that Lectern was known for. Nomad is overseeing the creation of the treaty, but deep down knows better. Nomad has observed and painted so many living beings that he truly understands their souls better than themselves. Nomad knows that with that much power, Jeremiah Oliver would never sign a treaty over the colony unless it was written by himself. Nomad had a better plan, but keeps it to himself. We cut to Morris, staring at the map he's spent all week making. He draws a circle around 2 temples discovered nearby, the closest being a half a day's trek away. Morris was slightly annoyed by the recent events, but even more peeved by John Quill waving off his plan, a plan that would work in everyone's favor. Why risk your neck brokering peace with snakes when you can just unearth an ancient artifact of mass destruction from a nearby temple? Too dangerous, he says. Too very unlikely, he says. Morris brainstorms other ways to undermine Atlas and get a leg up. What he needed first was a grand anomalite crystal. He recalls seeing the anomalite hunter earlier in town. Where could she be? Morris searches town for hours until he runs dead smack into Kuth's big, mighty, hairy chest. Morris, Kuth tired of seeing ugly Atlas statue. Kuth is going on expedition. Blow off steam, yes? Back before you know it. Morris tells him to wait up, for he is looking for the anomalite hunter who may have traveled out of the colony. The two agree to go traveling together in search of the hunter and some wild beasts. Ika was furious. Atlas has completely stolen her shine, a cardinal sin, and to add to it, they were ruining her colony. She felt it was time to take matters into her own hands. If Atlas would use deceit, then she would fight fire with fire. Lost in thought, she didn't even notice the devilish, dapper stranger standing beside her, striving for her attention. Ika, hello. Once he finally has her attention, he hands her a personal invitation to Razul's tasting, happening tonight, sponsored by Atlas. She has been personally invited by Razul Nosferatu himself. Ika was surprised and honored. She felt important again, but she was conflicted and despised everything born of Atlas's greed. Ika gets a devious look on her face and accepts the invitation. She would surely make a guest appearance that no one will forget. We cut to Ika standing behind a building in secret, recording her voice with a sound recorder, only it wasn't her voice it sounded like. She was using her android vocal manipulation to replicate Jeremiah's voice as she spoke of heinous acts and made incriminatory claims that would discredit Atlas immensely and put Jeremiah under the prison. Ika looks around, then stows away the recorder and proceeds to enter the private tasting being facilitated in a fancy, luxurious building that was given to Razul by Jeremiah himself. Surely a precursor to a lucrative and budding business relationship between Razul Nosferatu and Jeremiah Oliver. Once Ika enters, we see her being tailed by a spy who enters in after her. We cut to the innermost workings of the grandest, most pristine kitchen ever to exist, where we see Razul Nosferatu, the demon chef, speaking to Jeremiah Oliver over the phone. Mr. Oliver, I've given you perfection. It would be quite a shame if you failed on your end of the deal, yes? His eyes flash red. Jeremiah ensures Razul that the ingredient he seeks will certainly be provided very soon. Razul nods and tells Jeremiah he will have a plate of tonight's sample delivered to him, then ends the call. Razul closes his eyes, meditating on the greatness he was about to bestow upon his visitors today. We zoom into his face, then back out as he opens them dramatically as he is met with cheers and praise upon entering the ballroom. All around we see Atlas employees, once ordinary colonists, all dressed in lavish clothing provided to them by Atlas. They all rise to their feet at their candlelit dinner tables, applauding Razul Nosferatu, the demon chef. Ika sits at her reserved seat, refusing to stand or applaud, but nonetheless astonished by Razul's celebrity status. To think, just the other night, she declined his offer to taste true enhancement cooking. She was glad she did it, though. It still resonates, and she still hasn't stopped thinking about it since. News cameras and reporters crowd Razul. Even one of Haven's most famous celebs rushes him, dragging along her husband. Oh, Razul, finally, I have found you! She goes to leap into his chiseled pecs and wraps her arms around his neck when suddenly, with lightning reflexes, Razul brings his open hand across her husband's face for a slap of the century. The man holds his face in shock and the woman freezes in place, gasping. Two of Razul's staff come and whisk the two away to their seats while explaining why one never simply touches the demon chef. highly trained demon violinists garner everyone's attention as they run out onto the ballroom floor in beautiful formations, strumming their hearts out. The music reaches into the soul and stirs one's appetite. Razul claps his hands, and out comes dozens of waiters carrying dishes and places them in front of each guest. The smell was overwhelmingly sweet, yet opened up the nasal passages. What could it be? Razul himself delivers a dish over to a special guest of his whom he introduces to everyone and dedicates tonight's tasting to him. The people give a standing round of applause to an awkward and shy Korazia Tokishny. Razul removes the lid and asks that Korazia has the honors of taking the first bite. Korazia was very familiar with what was in the glowing red mass of perfection sizzling on his plate before him. He takes a big scoop and happily shoves it down his mouth, chewing with glee. Everyone else begins to taste theirs, and all we hear fill the room are their melting moans. Razul watches them all consume Korazia's rage mist toxin, extracted from his partner Myra's rage mist. Reverse engineered and modified, Korazia presented it as a welcoming gift from Atlas. With Razul's demonic cooking prowess, he could turn the heart of plague itself into a soft chocolate chip muffin. Razul was doing Atlas a favor in turn for many. Upon consumption of the dish, its subjects gain immunity from the rage mist and even a boost in strength and hardiness. After all, building a bridge that will unite continents couldn't be achieved on empty stomachs. Aika looks down at her dish, then at all the people. They were blissful and jubilant. Razul notices this as well. Perhaps an unintended side effect, he thinks, but that would be absurd. What Razul didn't know was that there were spies working. We see capsules and powders being dropped and poured into beverages all night with finesse and sleight of hand. Atlas propaganda knew no bounds. Aika was focused. She gets up and makes a beeline toward Razul. Razul turns and gazes at her as she bravely approaches. She eats the sample in front of him, and with an array of cute expressions of pleasure, she sells him on the notion that she was very much impressed by the food and enjoyed it. Razul smiles and waits to hear some more praise, but she had none. With all of her passion, she hands him the recorder. A friend at Atlas sent me this. Listen. Razul plays the recording for all to hear. Aika's spot-on mimicry of Jeremiah has him sounding crazy, vile, and like an enemy to all. The recording ends, and Aika looks to the crowd. If Atlas is doing things like this behind closed doors, can we all really afford them our support and loyalty? Aika's message hits home. She was too darn cute. Along with her evidence, she began to sway them away from the haze they were in, overpowering the black market drugs that flowed through their system. They all recall the speech she gave days ago, and it still resonated within them. Razul was conflicted by the evidence, but it was bad for business, so he has her removed, kindly but swiftly. We cut to Morris and Kuth trekking through the lavish mutated jungle. Kuth whacks large obstructing bushes with an even larger mutant lizard. Loud and obnoxious, but damn if it wasn't effective, Morris thinks as he stumbles aside while holding the map over his head, covering him from raining lizard chunks. Kuth discovers giant tracks of a mysterious, undiscovered creature. Morris was a bit disturbed by the size of the tracks, actually. Ah, fresh tracks. Good for Kuth. Kuth dives into the dirt and begins crawling. Get down, Morris. Get down. Morris goes prone. There has been speak of livestock going missing lately. The two crawl about 50 yards until they arrive to what can only be described as a temple. Morris records the measurements of the last insect he saw, then looks up in awe at what he and Kuth discovered. It was the temple he had seen from over the treetops when they arrived to the colony. Nebi architecture was as beautiful as historians said they were. Kuth, look! Morris points, and we see the anomalite hunter casing the temple. Morris and Kuth approach the hunter. "Hello, friend," Morris shouts. The hunter greets them happily. How could she forget the wanderers? She pays her respects for all that they have done for the colony thus far. After several minutes of parley and pleasantries, Morris asks if she still has the grand anomalite crystal, to which she replies, no, she sold it. She does, however, bring to their attention the treasure sitting over there in the monument. She points. It has to be more valuable than an anomalite crystal, she says. She hands him her holoscope. Morris politely declines, as his third hand passes him his own wooden telescope. Gazing past the great and endless pitfall conveniently circling the entire temple, Morris can see a precious treasure sitting inside. Definitely treasure if I've ever seen some. And also a trap, Morris says as he tucks away his scope. Kuth looks around in high alert. What fun is acquiring treasure without conquering a dragon first, he mumbles. The hunter suggests getting Big Guy here to knock down some trees, and that way they could walk across. No tree, Kuth shouts. Trees are death. You strike, poof, you die. Kuth explains that these trees are aberrant in nature, a phenomena typical with nature when it's corrupted. He has survived enough fantastic and bizarre worlds to know this as fact. Perhaps that explains the skeleton lumberjacks over there. We cut to a pile of bones of travelers who attempted to chop down trees to reach the temple. Suddenly, the ground trembles and we hear what can only be described as the whoosh from large flapping wings. Kuth pulls his titanic hammer off of his back. No slay dragon, no treasure. Morris runs and takes cover along with the anomalite hunter. Suddenly, leaping out of the trees and charging Kuth, we see an enormous blood-covered bipedal bird with razor-sharp talons, bill, tough scales, and spikes protruding from out under its feathers. It wails with incredibly loud, eardrum-exploding quacks. It is truly a beast worth slaying. It strikes out at Kuth in an attempt to scoop him up and swallow him whole like a piece of bread. But Kuth doesn't duck. He stands his ground, blocking with his mighty hammer that was almost the size of the bird's entire head. An unmovable object, Kuth grabs onto the beast's bill when it bites at him the second time and is swung around, but not easily. He and his hammer weighed more than this entire creature, and Kuth used it to his advantage. While mounted, Kuth begins to punch the creature in its eye with large clobbering strikes until it begins to spaz out and flap its wings, leaving the ground briefly. The bird beast slams Kuth onto the ground and flings him over into the temple. Kuth's large body and hammer fly right through it, causing half of it to crumble. The bird beast pounces on top of Kuth, but is met with a mighty swing of his hammer that cracks its head and bill, sending it crashing to the ground. Kuth then jumps on top of it and begins choking it out with his hammer, asserting his dominance. After an hour of wrestling with the beast, it stops struggling, and Kuth falls back exhausted and rests his head on the monster. He looks over and sees the treasure sitting not too far from him, but what mattered to him the most was his new friend's health. We see Morris and the hunter standing across the pitfall, applauding Kuth. Kuth the truth! What should we call it? Later that night, Kuth nurses the creature to health. It turns out that it was gravely injured, and though all of the blood that covered it was not its own, a good amount of it was. Using ingredients from the forest, Kuth was able to treat most of the wounds, and the beast was very grateful. We cut to Morris and the hunter observing the ruined temple shrine. There were carvings of trees that were being depicted as being bringers of death. Laying upon the altar was a crystal. Both stare into it, admiring its facets, its design. The hunter goes to reach for it, but Morris slaps his hand away with his wooden stick. You should know better than that. Come on, you're a hunter. Morris taps the crystal with his stick, triggering a concerning reaction. The tip of the stick immediately turns black and begins to crumble away. The crystal was cursed. Using his third gloved disembodied hand, Morris clenches the gem and pulls it up, revealing it to be a staff of sorts. The crystal was the crown on a long walking stick. Its wood was black like charcoal, and it reeked of the dead. Morris holds the staff carefully with his majestic hand, observing it. Holding his nose, he ponders on what this death stick could possibly be capable of. Perhaps he'll figure it out on the way back. Huth stands up and pets his newfound companion on the head. He was very satisfied with his catch and is ready to protect the colony. Morris and Huth head back to the colony with some newfound assets, when suddenly their attention is pulled away by what appears to be ultra-bright blue lights illuminating the sky. It was all around them, and very reminiscent of the night skies of Haven City. What could be happening? We cut to Lectern standing outside of Selena's brothel with his goons and a badly beaten colonist. Ever since Ika's fake whistleblowing, several disobedient fools have tried to terminate their own contracts, but that's not how Lectern gets down, whether in Galgan District or not. Lectern gives the colonist an ultimatum to finish his contract. The only way out is by working at Selena's brothel for 7 days. The colonists loved the idea, and so did Lectern. The increasing rate of disappearances of disgruntled contractors was instilling just the right amount of fear in people's hearts. He was all for it. Lectern's teleslab begins to vibrate and glow. He answers. Jeremiah tells him that it's showtime. We then cut to Lectern and his goons congregating around the only power grid the Nebuhaven colony had. Lectern walks up to it, and with both electro gauntlets drawn and charged up, he plunges both of his fists into the grid, overloading it with tremendous electrical chaos, irreparably destroying the grid entirely. The entire colony goes dark, but not for long. Atlas CEO Jeremiah Oliver stands at the helm of Atlas Operations and gives the signal to commence the last stages of Unity Atlas's vision. The camera pans up and we are brought to the rooftop of Atlas's Nebu quarters. Standing upon it, we see the futurist standing with his arms up and open as if reaching for the clouds. He begins to slowly pull Jeremiah's dreams from the dream realm into existence. The futurist was an incredibly powerful dream manipulator, and this would be his second great feat since unleashing the Atlas Basilisk upon Nebu. We begin to see large colossal reactors appear from the dream dimension. They were incredibly advanced, bleeding-edge technology that you could only dream of. All over the jungle, these reactors are erected, though inactive at first. We cut to a frightening-looking Atlas worker in a hard hat with a large grin and ashen gray skin. He climbs up on the reactors with supernatural athleticism, losing his hard hat in the process. Once up top, it pulls out this mysterious box that we last saw being delivered to Jeremiah from Dravko Mons. The man slowly pulls out a black enchanted orb and holds it up to his eye, admiring its inner power. He then slowly drops it into the reactor, like dropping eggs into boiling water. This, in turn, enchants the dream reactor and instantly activates it, while the man laughs maniacally and leaps off of the reactor with the box and heads to the next reactor. This was the beginning of a new era. Finally, it has been done. The reactors begin siphoning Nebu's endless energy, created by Epine's sacrifice, and begins pumping it into the Atlas Haven colony's resource. Jeremiah Oliver demonstrates to the people of Haven that what he's been promising all this time is possible. Endless energy to fuel the tank forever. In honor of Epine's unfortunate demise, Jeremiah calls it Epin Energy. Atlas android officers enter the colony with power modules restoring the power with superior, natural and clean Epin energy. The colony has now become completely reliant on Atlas's Epin energy source. Since then, production on the Atlas Unity Bridge has increased tenfold. We see Atlas Unity workers in tip-top form, fitted with nanotech limbs, massive arms, bulging lats. Men, women of all races can be seen building the bridge, glistening under the moonlight. All this was made possible by a renowned nanotech dealer by the name of Jack Crawford. Of all the enhanced workers, we see an elder man who could only afford a nanotech heart replacement, something he needed in order to be able to provide for his family, and for that reason he struggles to keep up and is approached by Jack Crawford. Jack sparks a cig while standing over the collapsed man. If time is money and you're wasting my time, that means you're wasting my money. The man tries to get up but cannot. See? That's where this starts to become a problem, and I'm not too keen on those. Jack snaps his fingers and calls for his people to remove him from the construction area, and also remove the nanotech from his heart. He couldn't uphold his end of the bargain. Why should Jack? We see John Quill watching the landscape change in front of his eyes. Atlas truly was taking over with zero regard for the Haven Guard communes. Nomad was neutral on the topic of which group of meatbags deserved to rule the territory. What mattered to Nomad was that the outside intrusions were contaminating his studies. Yesterday, a monument. Today, reactors. Tomorrow, a bridge. Nomad insists on taking swift action. Swift action as in taking a quick trip through the Eventide spatial bridge and coming back with the mark tied up. John Quill doesn't think force at this juncture is the best option. Just give it a few more days. The invitation had just been sent, and it's only a matter of time before Atlas responds. We'll give it another day or so. For Atlas's sake, they better accept. Nebu was everything to John Sage Quill, and he'd never let it go for as long as he was alive. He owes that to his people. We cut to Jeremiah Oliver protected and safe within a convoy of heavy-duty Atlas trucks. Days have gone by since being back at the headquarters. They were in search of the temple Legion was attacked at. Jeremiah was accompanied by his bodyguard, Dravko Mas, his goons, Legion, and Atlas officers, who are all heavily armed. A Legion kin pulls over and lets them know that they have arrived to their destination. Jeremiah rolls his window down and lifts up his shades. He sees a torched clearing in the jungle still smoldering with a glowing orange temple in the center. Yeah, this was definitely where it was going down. Stay on guard. Dravko rolls his eyes. Legion directs them to the temple and informs them that this is where he was attacked, and that the enemy can still be near. Dravko Mas smells the air. The stench of Haven's Bayou. They're still here, all right. The moment he says that, walking out from the Dragon Temple, we see the underground war shaman himself, Brezalek, large, muscular, and radiant, with glowing Nebi symbols all over his slimy Callidian body. Legion informs them that Brezalek may have just come in contact with a unique artifact. Jeremiah was peeved. You said there was nothing here. Legion corrects him. Negative. I informed you of the presence of scraps of incomplete parchment. Jeremiah interrupts. You left out the part about the glowing Nebi Yaga Makai magic bullshit. We cut to Brezalek slowly descending the temple steps toward Atlas. Behind him, we see two sinister-looking Callidian shamans take position at the top of the steps. Those aren't symbols of the Yaga deity. They are, however, ancient. Jeremiah shouts, "It's too late now," and begins going on and on about how it should have been secured. Legion thinks to himself of the incredible odds that he discovered a scrap at the same moment another would, who also happened to have all of the other pieces to complete it. It statistically made no sense. Legion suddenly snaps, "Enough!" His hair becomes a bit more frazzled, his eyes intense. Even Dravko looks over at the night skin. Jeremiah stops and listens. Legion continues. "We were attacked before we could react." Drav interrupts. "We might be getting attacked now." Brezalek was brolic for a Khalidian. He's cannibalized so many life forms that he has grown into a monstrosity of a G-type. His combat shaman regalia was filthy, his body wet and veiny. He stops in front of Drav, who has put himself in between he and Jeremiah. "You stench of Haven City," Drav replies. "Yeah, well, we aren't in Haven City, and yet here we all are. Maybe it's you and me." Brezalek looks up at the towering Dravko. He recognized the criminal kingpin of the underground, but it was Brezalek who was literally the underground. "You shouldn't have come here." Jeremiah steps in front of Drav and tries to reason with Brezalek. He tries not to choke on Brezalek's stench, though. He searches for common ground, but Brezalek interrupts and educates him on the brutal Khalidian history. Jeremiah takes a step back from his violent outburst and replies, Hey, I recognize the Khalidian struggle, oh great shaman Brezalek. The Atlas Nebi colony is a home for everyone. I've even created a Khalidian commune for you and your brothers and sisters." As Jeremiah takes credit for what Havenguard has done so far, he sees Brezalek's eyes light up, but not for a good reason. Yeah, you like that. I see you have 2 shamans up there. Well, we have 1 shaman. We can have your shamans meet our shamans. Brezalek's draconic Nebi tattoos begin to glow as he roars. "You and your shaman will melt upon each other in the bottom of our cauldrons." Brezalek flexes and roars as both of his shamans begin casting. We hear a loud rumbling as a massive bronze, winged dragon emerges from the temple behind them, crumbling its entrance. This was the ancient power of the scraps. Brezalek had become tethered to an ancient Nebi dragon, offspring of the fabled dragon chi beast god. Atlas is the only one providing solutions to save Haven. You either join the viaduct of progress or be crushed. Draft pushes Jeremiah back and tells him and Legion to run. We see several Legion kin escort Jeremiah away. Legion remains by Drav's side. "What are you doing? You trying to tell me you fight? Bullshit. Stick to your night job, librarian nerd." Legion loosens his tie and unhinges his cufflinks while reading the battlefield. His eyes look at each enemy from the shamans to the raging dragon and rest them on Drav and says, "Protect me." "I don't recall Cortec cutting a check." "A dragon will kill us both. We have an 89% chance of surviving and ultimately tilt the scales of Atlas conquest in our favor if you can cooperate with me for 100% of the time within the next 8 minutes. Dravko became a bit dizzy from his mumbo-jumbo bullshit, but agrees to protect Legion and follows his lead. We see Legion kin agents leap out of the trees and flank the shaman. An agent fires their pistol while closing in with a knife, but the shaman melts incoming bullets with an invisible shield of heat. The agent lunges in with the knife and melts into a bloody pudding when reaching the shaman, who then summons 3 skeletal minions who begin to attack a trio of approaching Legion agents. The other shaman casts an assortment of forbidden magic to hold off the ambush as well. Brezalek runs toward Drav and engages him in a contest of strength. Drav catches both of his hands and laughs at how pitiful he was. Drav then takes his arm and swings him like a wet towel into the ground. Brezalek literally bounces off of the ground, still holding on to Drav's hand, and with draconic strength swings Drav Komas into the air onto the ground like a big dead lizard. Drav hits the ground hard and laid there stunned. Brezalek immediately turns around and looks at Legion, who is standing in place, calm and confident. Brezalek goes to leap toward him, but has 2 of Drav's humongous arms reach from behind him and crushes him with a deadly bear hug. Drav tries to break him, but the Khalidian's squishy anatomy saw to it that it was impossible. Draft then leaps up and slams Brezilek onto his face, then stomps the back of his head into the dirt. And suddenly, the dragon's massive tail whooshes by, but Dravko Maz hurdles over top of it. We also see Legion flip over it. The tail comes back toward Draft, but Drav holds his ground, taking it like a champ. It hits him like a truck, but being the tank that he is, he takes it like it's nothing, holding his ground. Brezilek leaps at Dravko with large flaming dragon claws that have manifested over his own. With one rake of them, the energy rips through his clothing, armor, and even his impenetrable scales. Blood and body matter gush out of Dravko's chest. He roars from the pain that he hasn't felt in a while since the big iron. Brezilek lunges again, but Dravko evades and chops Brez in the back of his neck. But with no bones to break, Brezilek counters with a nova of raw, primordial energy exploding from around him, sending Drav flying toward Legion, who rolls out of the way. Brezilek continues his attack and targets Legion. Legion evades, Brezilek slashes, Legion ducks. Brezilek attempts to grab, but Legion backflips over Drav, who tackles Brezilek to the ground and clobbers him with two haymakers just before the dragon engages and scoops Drav up with its claws. Brezilek shakes it off and continues to pursue Legion. We cut to the shaman's skeletal minion, lopping off the head of a Legionkin with skillful swordplay. Brezilek's shamans begin to double team an agent, roasting him with ancient primordial flame, when suddenly a flashbang grenade goes off, disorienting them both, resulting in one having a laser knife plunged deep into their neck and then having its throat cut out by a Legionkin assassin. We cut to Drav stuck in the grips of an ancient Nebi dragon being crushed under the control of Brezilek. The dragon looks Drav in his eyes and with Brezilek's voice begins to rant about shaman politics and shaman Onrik. Drav interrupts by shouting about how much he doesn't give a fuck about shamans and most definitely not about Khalidian worms. Brezilek became even more enraged and proceeds to have the dragon spew incredible gouts of flame directly at Drav. We see Dravko Maz in the grips of the dragon being drenched in ancient draconic flame. Drav roars in pain and was left charbroiled and naked in the dragon's grip. Dravko Maz coughs and looks up at the dragon. Brezilek couldn't believe Drav's endurance. His scales truly were incredible. Drav takes a deep breath and lets out his own roar that was bassier and more terrifying than Brezilek's dragon, except it wasn't flame that followed his bellowing quake. Drav spews out a massive blast of virulent acid that engulfs the dragon's entire hand, melting it on contact and thus releasing Drav, sending him plummeting to the ground. The dragon roars in pain and begins flailing about. Its tail smashes into the shaman with the heat shield, killing them on contact. Brezilek swings and swings at Legion, but Legion's calculated every move and made all of his defensive maneuvers based on statistical analysis. Brezilek attacks so many times that he becomes dizzy, and before you know it, Legion is nowhere in sight. Brezilek turns around and walks face first into a planet-shattering kick to the head by Dravko Maz that deflates Brezilek's skull. Brezilek stumbles back in critical condition, so much so he tries to use the power of the scraps to heal himself with draconic auras. But before he could, Dravko punches him so hard in the chest he penetrates his ribcage and grabs his spine. Drav then shakes Brezilek like a ragdoll while trying to detach his spine from the rest of his body, all while punching Brez in the head. Jeremiah watches in horror, hoping that Drav never learns about his alter ego, or that could be his own fate. Drav then realizes Brezilek is dead and tosses him to the side. The dragon continues to flail and wail, but when Brezilek's bond is severed, the dragon becomes stunned and falls to the ground. The dragon opens its eyes and sees Legion standing in front of it with a maniacal smile. Legion wipes his hand across the dragon's face and collects 4 fingers worth of dragon's blood and wipes it across his mouth. Before the dragon could recover and begin going into an uproar, Legion jams his blue nightskin hands into its eye, roughly, and implants his nightskin DNA into the head. The dragon begins to scream and seizure as Legion's DNA begins to overtake the dragon's biology. Its body begins to morph before Legion's very own eyes, like seeing his own child being born. Legion is smiling for the first time. A wide grin of madness overtakes his excitement of letting go in a very, very long time. He has carried the night-skinned species to a new level. The time for petty politics and treaties are over. Now is the time for action. These maggots will know fear, strength and unity, unity and strength. We will become everything and all things. Dravko Mas and Jeremiah watches in awe as the large dragon becomes assimilated with the night skin, its bronze scales changing to a dark night blue. Softer, fleshy portions and other mammalian features appear. Its fins become shiny blue hair, its eyes become bright as the stars. Other Legion clones then begin to touch the Legion Gon and evolve into Legion Gons themselves, just smaller in size, which was still humongous. With his family behind him, Legion turns around and looks at J.O. The colony will be ours. John Quill finishes lecturing a class of young Nebi leaders on the principles of Yaga. They all rise and bow and make their way back home. One young Nebi woman stays behind and approaches John to pay mad respects. She tells him she would die for him, her people, and her country. John saw that twinkle in her eye and truly believed her. She reminded him of Makai. He really was reaching the hearts of the colonists who were looking to start a new life. John Quill walks out to his balcony and watches in sorrow the colony workers corrupted by Atlas, souped up on Jack Crawford's body enhancements. He found it hard to watch his beautiful mother continent get pillaged by giant reactors, leeching life from it. The ugliness from Haven was surely making its way into the Nebi colony. Suddenly, John Quill is apprehended from behind and has a bag placed over his head as he is forcefully placed into a chair and dragged away. Moments later, while John is shouting to be freed and trying to reason with his captors, he hears an emotionless voice asking him to calm and that everything is okay. The bag is removed from his head and we see Nomad standing in an empty room with him. The hell are you doing, Nomad? It's been almost a week. Jeremiah will not come. We must bring him to us. John shouts, "No, Nomad! That's not how we should do this. Listen!" Nomad had no emotions. He was as android as androids come. Quill's inspiration and celebrity status resonated with him not. Vera Zima appears from the shadows of the room. Vera? You're going along with this too? Vera nods, slightly ashamed. But she agreed with Nomad. Atlas had powerful G-types in their camp. Another visit from Jace Beleren could be the end for all of them. The only safe way was with force. Kidnap Jeremiah and then force him into this treaty with Vera overseeing it. John grits his teeth. Is everything about force with you Havenites? Vera interrupts. Did Yaga Makai not force all of your people into the promised land? Quill was silent. How could a migrant know about that? Nomad tells Quill that it doesn't have to be forced. You are the Honorable John Sage, Quill. When you look Jeremiah in the eyes and talk to him, you will inspire him to do what is right, will you not? John looks at Nomad, and for a moment, he seems to space out, then comes back to his senses. He shakes his head and lowers it. Nomad tells him that he will return with Jeremiah. He opens up the Eventide bridge and steps up on it, looks back at them, then enters through. We see Jacob's boots touch down as we pan up his muscular physique adorned in his blood-red, whiskey-stained trench coat. He looks around, surveying the entirety of the service tunnel's immediate area as the rest of his army arrives and occupies the scene. Then Ryusai Ali leaps out of the sunroof acrobatically and lands on her feet with Yggdrasil on her back. She stares in awe at the rad Sawblaze mural and begins taking photos for her Gammagram story. There was no time to spare. Jacob had his heart set on ridding the city, no, the world, of this disgusting cancer that is the Survey Day once and for all. Jacob begins pointing and giving orders to his soldiers to search the area for any hidden entrances, and within moments, several are discovered in the immediate area. Jacob approaches the closest to the mural and begins to feel the nearly invisible runic etchings in the wall. Haven Guard soldiers were merely passionate everyday Joes whose skill sets were varied but nothing too exotic, nothing too in the realm of magic, save for a smaller task force who knew their way around the mystic arts. However, they've been deployed to Nibu to assist with Shaman Onric in the Gate Guard Magitech initiative, so there was no one there to tell Jacob that this was a bad idea. Jacob runs his fingers along the patterns, causing them to glow, warm to the touch. Ali shouts,
"Hey, I wouldn't do that. That green stuff ain't no joke."
Jacob downplays the threat. He wasn't scared of magic, runes, and voodoo. Nothing can be any more dangerous than plugging a teleslab into The room explodes with bright, raw Takena magic. Jacob stands in place, visibly ruined by the explosion, cooked flesh torn by Takena fire, and his coat was a light crisp. Jacob wipes his bloody face, his flesh peeling away and already slowly healing. All his Haven Guard soldiers watch in awe at how their leader endures the explosion. With partial lips, Jacob croaks, "Found it." We see a pack of cultists floating toward their lair's exit to hunt in the city for the night, when a slight rumbling grabs their attention. Rubble falls from above, and the two cultists look at each other, alert from the commotion, and then up above them. Suddenly, through a massive, fiery explosion of rubble, Jacob, Ali, and squadrons of Haven Guard come crashing through the ceiling, crushing everything below them, even the cultists. We see a montage of inner walls and ceilings of Survey Day sanctums being blown up and collapsing in on its vile inhabitants as Haven Guard bursts through, raiding the Emerald Fortresses from all angles with incredible firepower. We see cultists recklessly hurling Takena bolts at their invaders while holding their ground, but with Jacob's order to annihilate all hostiles on sight, the guardsmen's weapons overwhelm their foes with cold, swift lethality. Bullets whiz through crowds of enemies, sparing all hostages. Pocket cavern lairs are scanned, then lit up with modified Jacob-rigged search missiles that soar and divide into many projectiles, destroying many hostiles at once. We see Ali recording the entire infiltration and rescuing hostages. Haven Guard makes their way deeper and deeper into the caverns, infiltrating strategically with no casualties. That is, until they begin to encounter the elite cultists, who are a bit harder to kill, but can be nonetheless. With precise, supernatural skill with the mythical blade Yggdrasil, Ali zigzags at breakneck speeds on the edge of the sound barrier, slicing up her foes courtesy of the limitless infinium. Ali impales an elite cultist through the side of their abdomen, then, with the hilt gripped tightly, begins to run circles around her target, carving them up like a turkey. An elite cultist lunges at her from behind with the Takena energy blade, but she parries without looking, and they clash swords. Ali turns and winks. The cultist was shocked by Yggdrasil's durability, but even more so the kid's strength. The cultist swings again, but at a speed undetectable. She parries, then leaps on his wrists, runs up his arm, and kicks off his head harshly into a somersault behind him. Ali's Yggdrasil begins to morph into a peculiar Gokin weapon, often described as a boomerang sword hybrid that Ali sends soaring past the elite cultists. The buff, pale, robed cultist spews a violent string of incantations that manifest and fire bursts of sharp Takena energy. However, misses the young star, who we see entertaining her audience via live stream by evading the attack effortlessly while doing the robot. The cultist screams in frustration and snatches up a fleeing hostage. The teen migrant was frozen by the thought of the Takena knife slitting his throat like so many before him. Ali frowns in disappointment of the cowardly cultist and holds her hand up in the air. I was hoping for a battle of wits, but you appear to be unarmed. When just then, her boomerang flies into her hand, transforming back to Yggdrasil's base form. The elite cultist begins to back up with his hostage gripped up, when suddenly, in what felt like an instant, both arms detach from the cultist, clean cut from their shoulders. The rending of Yggdrasil was so fast, the agony and severance was delayed, just in time for Ali to dash forward, flip over the now liberated hostage, sending a velocity-empowered kick that collapses the cultist like a house of cards. We cut to the cult ringleader, awaiting in his lair for his next migrant vessel to consume. Growing impatient, the cultist screams for his next meal angrily. But still nothing. We then see a figure limping into the lair, though much larger, heavier, bloodier, and angrier. A mangle-faced Jacob Bastian steps out of the dark, walking slowly toward him with a shotgun in hand, bottle of whiskey in the other. The cultist frowns. So-called guardians of Haven, you are all cattle, sheep, duck, food. Jacob takes a swig, then tosses the empty bottle over by the cultist's feet, shattering. How dare you! The cultist begins casting a powerful Takena hex toward Jacob, but Jacob begins jogging toward him with his loaded shotgun. Upon completion of the hex, the cultist screams the final spell that causes a small nova of Takena energy to manifest inside of Jacob, separating all matter from each other, leaving a spiraling hole in the side of Jacob's body, staggering him greatly. Jacob drops to his knees briefly, but continues to push on despite the destructive spell seemingly pulling him apart. The cultist looks shocked at Jacob's tenacity and begins to back up while casting more Master Takena spells. A Takena ray is fired at Jacob, who hunkers down and blocks a direct hit with his shotgun, in turn destroying it, crumbling it in his hands. The cultist blasts 3 more while being slowly pressed. Jacob rolls out of the way of one, retrieves his rifle and aims down his target, but has the gun eradicated by another ray of Takena, followed by a third that blasts him square in the chest and off of his feet, but not before pulling the pin on 2 Smoky Boys, a highly explosive hand grenade handcrafted by Jacob himself that we now see bouncing across the floor, landing below the cultist's feet, pending a deadly explosion. Suddenly, leaping out of the smoke and onto Jacob, the cultist, grotesque and with a morphed face, begins to peel back in quadrants while a Takena soul-sucking tentacle bursts out of his forehead, biting at Jacob's face repeatedly until he manages to grip the monstrosity by the neck. The cultist couldn't understand how an ordinary G-type could be so formidable. Who are you? The cultist hisses. Jacob smashes the shotgun parts into the cultist's tentacle, then wrestles him against the lair's abstract furniture. With a bloody, mangled face and cold, determined eyes, Jacob replies, I'm known as a lot of things. To you, your cult, your cave palace, I'm the demolition man. Jacob wrestles with the struggling cultist with one hand while rigging the shotgun parts into something even more ridiculous but devastating with the other hand. Jacob rigs together a short Frankenstein of a rifle made from broken shotgun parts and a belt of emergency components, then points it at the cultist's head and blows his brains out with the pull of some kind of doohickey. Ali runs in behind him. Behind her, a line of countless missing migrant hostages. Jacob kicks a sack of explosives over to her. In it contains several unique bombs created by him. Jacob and several guardsmen round up and begin to lead the hostages to the surface. Before departing, he nods at Ali, who nods back and leaves her behind. Ali opens up the bag and pulls out the bombs, ready to fulfill the rest of the plan. Jacob and the guardsmen fight their way back to the surface as fast as possible. Waiting by the entrance, we see Ali waving them down. Jacob rushes up to her and wants to ask a question, but is trying to catch his breath. Ali slaps the old man on his back. Save your breath. You'll need it to blow up your date tonight. I planted the bangers, okay? The bangers are planted. Damn, he doesn't know if Ali is as annoying as she is fast or faster than she is annoying, which sounded impossible. Ali's teleslab begins chiming. She looks to see who's calling and sees a yellow Mason Mark coyote dancing on the slab. Jacob pulls out the remote and tells everyone to clear the tunnels. Ali tells him to wait and shows him Marshall's video call. We cut to Atlas's teleslab studio, home to Central Haven's most grand teleslab and broadcasting station. Avalon Hyperion speaks his rhetoric to the people in lieu of Tempest's leaked declaration. He explains how the Hyperion advancement and Atlas's android police are better suited to protect Haven and its people. Suddenly, crashing into the shot, we see Marshall Mesa pushing Avalon out of the way and explains to the city how twisted the mindset of the advanced is. He also admits to also being shocked by Tempest's comments, but challenges and advises everyone to form their own opinion for once. What feels right? Atlas android officers storm in and apprehend Marshall, with the whole city watching. Marshall wasn't going to assault anyone, and much rather share a very important message and not let that message be destroyed by violence. Marshall tells the city all that Haven Guard does for the world. His teleslab begins to display live footage of Haven Guard, Jacob and Ali rescuing thousands of hostages from the underground emerald palaces of the Survey Day. Ali is live streaming it all, her viewers at an all-time high. While yoked up by androids, Marshall shouts out at the people on live broadcast teleslab vision. You see them being saved? To Haven Guard? Those aren't just migrants, those aren't just G-types, those are people. And for the people, we cut to Jacob holding the remote, and just before pressing it, he along with everyone in the city says, everything, and he presses the button. The entirety of the underground Survey Day network is purged with red flames, eradicating all remaining traces of the cult, with no hostage left behind. Avalon commands for the broadcast to be cut and has Marshall removed from the premises by heavily armed Atlas officers. Marshall is bum-rushed and thrown out of the building, reunited with Oblivion. Marshall brushes himself off, satisfied with the message he delivered and the damage it did to Avalon and Tempest's bullshit. Though, he knew he would catch flack from the Dizzy Wizard for not using the opportunity to drop the suck on a popsicle tagline. Marshall goes to grab Oblivion's hand, but finds her nowhere to be found. He looks around. Marshall then looks up into the sky as we see Atlas Force helicopters cruising across it toward a rallying force of migrant and iron refugees led by Rezanok. A civil war was unfolding. We cut to the high steps of the fortress erected by the Featherfall commune, strictly built for the congregation of Haven Lords. It was designed by the wise alien minds of the Avian and Guru people, aesthetically strange, sturdy, tall and sound. The avatar of Featherfall, Mfano, stands at the head of the stairs, backed by civil rights leader Mada Mwete. Her presence was powerful and appropriate for what was presently unfolding. We see Xavier Ortiz and an entourage of fellow Toursan athletes and leaders escort him to the steps. His large, six-legged beast with a maw of sharp razor teeth accompanies him as he ascends up the steps, crowded by masses of the Toursan people who want to see the city become a better place. Also, approaching from across the grand stairway, we see the majestically suave Dizzy Wizard make his way up. Many were enamored by his presence, as if sighting a candy unicorn in the wild. Shaking hands, kissing babies, and casting candy magic that turns articles of clothing into sugary edibles. Then stepping up last, we see Tempest. It begins to storm, and the people get quiet. Sure, many wanted to boo and attack Tempest from his comments made, but there was already a deep solidified bond of respect for the man that left them conflicted, the same way Marshall was. Even Xavier, Infano, and Dizzy awaited an explanation, being that the mere point of this summit was to help everyone. Tempest walks halfway up the steps. He looks at the leaders, then turns around and faces the people. Tempest takes his hat off, despite the rain picking up. He reads the crowd. I could try my hardest to convince you that those words you heard were not my own, though virtually it seemed so. I am sympathetic to the one who would lend such a precious talent to such a miserable crusade. Instead, I will stand here and take ownership of what was said, for it is a reflection of how one of the many may feel toward our current situation. The crowd looks at each other. As Haven Lord of the people, your voice is mine and mine yours, so yes, that may as well have been me saying those things. Xavier, Infano, and Dizzy join Tempest with public displays of leader embrace. Together we govern the city as Haven Lords. Tempest declares his responsibility to the people as Haven Lord of the people. Dizzy enthusiastically takes on the title of Haven Lord of Joy and Candy. Xavier takes on the role of Haven Lord of Strength and Unity. And last, Infano seals the ceremony as Haven Lord of the Mystical Arts, solidifying their pact as Senate. Everyone cheers and celebrates, but the parade is soon brought to a freeze when Xavier steps forth to give everyone a reality check. He reminds them all that they are all facing many crises. He alludes to the resource drought, but not even he is fully aware of the magnitude. That he left up to Tempest. But what needed to be addressed immediately was the civil war the city didn't want, need, or could handle with its dwindling state. The Haven Lords initiate a call for peace between those for and against the occupancy of migrants from Anvil. Word gets back to Rezanok, who we see leading a charge toward Hyperion's forces. A skirmish of this size could destroy the entire Divergent district, in turn feeding into a war with the Huiosnas lost to Arsanos. Rezanok stops in his tracks and thinks about his end goal and the repercussions. Will believing in the Haven Lords bring an end to the hostility toward migrants? Rezanok wonders if it's even possible to see eye to eye with Avalon in the Advanced. He alone could crush Avalon himself, but wouldn't this lead to more casualties? If Anarchy 12 could be reasoned with, then perhaps so could Avalon. Hyperion generals stand in the street armed to the teeth as Atlas police observe, unbiased, or so they claim. Hovering above Hyperion's forces, we see a hologram of Avalon himself, watching, listening. Rezanok agrees to stand down, but only if Wait. What's that? Rezanok squints his eyes, peering across the war zone toward enemy forces. We see a Doloman woman darting through the Hyperion horde toward the captain and general standing on the Hyperion tanks. She was an older woman, her dirty red hair bound up behind her headband. She was dressed in a trench coat bearing Haven Guard's emblem of the Manticore Rebellion. The migrant supporter leaps up onto the tank toward the general on his flank and impales a metal rod through his neck that detracts, then extends into a flagpole bearing a big flapping flag that reads, "Suck on a popsicle." She then begins beating her chest, taunting the surrounding forces to face her in the name of Haven Guard. The city watches the broadcast in awe until everyone realizes that the Doloman migrant supporter was not beating her chest at all, but instead was activating bombs strapped to her chest under her coat. Just before she could hit the button, she is sniped off of the Hyperion tank, but even still, her explosive gear ignites and blows up, taking out several soldiers, obliterating the tank as well. Avalon immediately stands up and orders the Hyperion forces to kill all hostiles and commence all underground operations. This command is soon followed by a storm of gunfire and death. Avalon ends the hologram, and we see him standing on Atlas Studios' broadcasting platform with a devious grin. He then swipes his entire face with an open palm, leaving nothing but the crystal clear polish of Mirror 3's face, or lack thereof. Mirror turns around and faces the real Avalon Hyperion, who is being held down by two large Torsons. Mirror pulls out a silenced pistol and puts two in Avalon's dome, ending the tyrant's run. Mirror then leaves Atlas Studio for its staff and Jace Belaren's spies to clean up. We see the eyes of Rezanok, and all of the Haven Lord's eyes light up in shock of the sudden recent events. Seconds ago, they almost had peace, and now war. Xavier looks up and around as if reading the field and takes notice at how Atlas's police force spectate from rooftops and sidelines, unworried, unbothered, as if waiting for both sides to wipe themselves out. Rezanok, they're approaching. Are we fighting? One of his supporters asks. Rezanok's lack of leadership experience began to show, and the migrants who had half the firepower are getting fidgety. It seems a bloodbath couldn't be avoided, unfortunately. Both sides begin to clash, and all hell breaks loose in the divergent district. Tempest only hopes Syrian is having an easier time on his end. The bitter lesser god and rival sibling of the current god of rock, Uneldu, approaches Min Gray and pays little attention to the weak mortals that share the patch of concrete she stands on. Uneldu was armored and towered over them all. She had both male and female anatomy and was overall a frightening sight to behold. Min Gray tells the others to leave quickly before they are stuck here dealing with this nuisance. R-Type X stares up at Uneldu with a blank stare. On the inside, he was elated to face an eldritch god, but keeps a cool head on the out. Malross orders the sect to take all of the research they found today to the frontier. He hands his most trusted apostle a satchel filled with grand anomalite crystals and says a prayer. The apostle's hair flickers white for a brief second once the prayer hits. The apostle bows, then darts off with the sect. He then commands 3 of his elite magi to stay with him, R-Type and Min Gray. Min thanks them both for their support, but warns them that a rock battle between eldritch gods could level these districts, not to mention our friends. She points at the uncryptids slowly creeping close. Once the battle begins, those barriers are going down and the uncryptids will be all over us. Uneldu included, Min says. Malross says that he'll fend off the uncryptids. R-Type cracks his knuckles and says he'll ensure the safety of the district and will assist with the uncryptids as well. Min smirks. She was grateful for her brave allies. The intense vibration she feels in her hands is Gruul Saber telling her it wants that fight bad. She holds out Gruul Saber in front of her, and thunder rumbles in the air. Uneldu frowns and reminds Min Gray that if she loses, she will destroy her entire planet, and only then will we all see how much of a true god she is, suffocating in the coldness of space. R-Type X laughs at Uneldu's ignorance of the company she's keeping. For a god, you know very little. Min Gray freaks out for a second. She couldn't believe R-Type X just said that to Uneldu. We cut to a close-up of Uneldu's eyes as they gaze only at Min Gray. She wasn't even fazed by R-Type's insult and refused to acknowledge his presence. He wasn't worthy. She does, however, warn Min Gray to keep her fans in order. Uneldu's eldritch guitar of choice, the Elder Gander, hovers off of her back and into her arms. Its golden scales shine bright into the eyes of Min Gray, causing her to flinch violently. Shall we begin? With one strum of her guitar, the entire ground shatters into millions of chunks, and they all levitate miles into the air. Uneldu's arm begins to glow, and she suddenly begins to go incredibly insane, ripping her godly instrument. All of the fragments of debris and land begin spiraling and revolving around Uneldu as if she herself was a planet. Malross and his magi hold on for dear life. R-Type X even drops to one knee from the incredible velocity. With the flex of R-Type's mind and muscle, he creates an explosion of intergravitational force that radiates outward, greatly warping the gravitational pull, making Malross and Min Gray's bodies more dense. This in turn allowed them to hold their ground and maneuver despite orbiting around Uneldu 100 miles a minute. Uneldu shreds her guitar and puts her pain into it. We see her face display anguish, heartbreak, and rejection, and it all pours out into her sonic maelstrom. Min Gray is completely overwhelmed by her rock force, but Gruul Saber's aura strengthens to protect her from fainting. Uneldu begins to bring her ballad to a close and starts to spin, causing cyclones of meteorites to form, and on her last riff, they all are then hurled in several separate directions and will surely kill thousands of civilians below, when suddenly R-Type pulls them back inward and tries his hardest to keep them in place. R-Type X yells at Min Gray to rock out. Min Gray is on one knee, stunned by Uneldu's grim and passionate ballad. She hears R-Type's inspirational words, however. "Min, you must pick up the vibe. Never let them control the vibe," he shouts while trying to contain the large meteors. Min Gray was always inspired by the Raylegarians' musical culture and discipline. She clenches Gruul Saber and tries to pull herself up to begin her round before Uneldu grows too confident from a perfect start. "Hurry, Min!" R-Type shouts while trying to keep his grip. He looks left, and yards away we see an uncryptid approaching R-Type X. It suddenly phases out, then back into the plane, standing right over R-Type. Just before the uncryptid can attack, we see a large green missile of radiation blast the uncryptid, causing it to vanish. At least for now. We look over and see Malross standing behind one of his elite magi with his hand on his shoulder. The elite magi has his sleeveless arm aimed outward. It was mutated and deformed, but purposely and of intelligent design. Malross was a master life crafter and knew the science and magic behind experimental biological body modifications. His elite apostles all possessed organic bionuclear enchantments within their body, including Malross himself. But that's what the elite were for. Malross activates their weapons, and they all begin providing cover fire for R-Type. Min Gray leaps to her feet and begins shredding with all her arcane might. Using sonic manipulation, she digs deep into the recesses of her mind and soul and channels her eldritch gift to generate a sonic wave large enough to destroy the meteors R-Type kept at bay. Min Gray's wings open up wide as waves of lightning plow through all the orbiting debris. Her hands move at lightning speed, and her tune is a tune of prosperity, righteousness, and respect. Uneldu holds her ground, unimpressed. Min Gray flies over to the Grand Teleslab and begins using it to amplify Gruul Saber's heavenly cry tenfold, sending a godly wave of force so strong, Uneldu stumbles and has to hold on to her Elder Gander. Uneldu counters Min Gray's jam with her own guitar riff. 7 teardrops fall from Uneldu's eye. Once her tears are evaporated by the sizzling humidity of her godly melody, this manifests as 7 comets that we see soar over Uneldu's head as she begins to run and slides on both knees headed straight toward Min Gray. But Min Gray flies out of the way. The stars begin to align above Uneldu, a sign of the battler gaining favor over her competition. Min Gray knows that if she doesn't step it up another notch, this plane is over. But what could she do? Min Gray doesn't think she was capable of going beyond her last round. How could she even dive on top of Uneldu's shredding? We zoom in on her fingers, moving at lightning speed, far out shredding Min Gray. We cut to R-Type X, leaping from rock to rock, punching, kicking comets and tiny asteroids out of the sky in order to protect Min and Malross. A shooting star flies off of Uneldu's guitar pick and heads straight toward Malross. R-Type X bursts, sprints, and appears in between Malross and the comet and swiftly parries the comet by diffusing its momentum on contact and redirects it by backhanding it into the sky. Malross thanks R-Type and points to Min Gray, who we see struggling to hold on. "You must help her," Malross shouts. R-Type X is suddenly hit with a massive flashback of his mother, Arabia, Queen Regent of Raylagar, speaking to him. Building your trust and fixing each other's mistakes. They need one another. You're going to screw up, but trust the ones around you to pick you up again. You need other people because you were not as much of a badass on your own as you thought you were. Imperfect people driven by things outside of their control. "R-Type!" Malross yells. Ryu focuses and leaps back into action. Min Gray is suddenly zapped by eldritch energy coming from Gruulsaber. It was Gruulsaber's way of telling her that she was doing the bare minimum in contrast to her full potential. But Min didn't believe it. Suddenly, Min Gray hears the bombastic rumbling of the drum and turns and sees R-Type X hovering in the air, surrounded by 11 makeshift drums made of floating debris. R-Type X taps into the unfettered mind of the Aoki Moju, a state where he lets Libra and his martial discipline take control, in turn gaining extraordinary automatic and instantaneous reflexes that are entirely involuntary. R-Type X wasn't a professional drummer, but every Raylagarian knew the war chant of the Gokin. R-Type was dedicated to doing what he could. R-Type begins wailing on the drums at an incredible pace with hypnotic cadence. Uneldu finally acknowledges R-Type X and begins to slow down. R-Type X smiles. "You're listening now, Uneldu. Listen close. Music is art of balance and perspective. The war drums of the heart of the Raylagarian is more than enough to rock a god. Will you be able to stand when facing against mine?" R-Type X begins to power up and scream, then smashes a tire iron into a car door. The strike of melodic force causes Uneldu's knee to give out. Min Gray is immediately inspired and begins to use the powerful blood-rushing tempo to speed up her own shredding. Min Gray shouts, "It's time to turn this up to 11!" and begins to become a hovering supernova of raw eldritch resonance, bleeding with the frequency of life. Uneldu's eyes grew and her heart began to skip beats. Min Gray begins to fly in circles around R-Type's sky-quaking war drums, causing the sky to twist and turn, ringing out tears of joy from the eldritch gods. It begins to pour, raining, but R-Type and Min Gray were above the storm clouds, Uneldu under them, drenched and looking up into the clearing in the sky vacated by Min Gray's god-rending performance. R-Type X screams with his tongue out, "Let's rock! The Ray mix will bring God to their knees!" Uneldu's eyelids and lips begin to melt away. Her hair withers. Min Gray never knew she could rock out at such an unfathomable level and matches Gruulsaber's level of eldritch power. But it so turns out that now Gruulsaber has been surpassed by Min Gray. This triggers Gruulsaber to grow. The entire guitar begins to glow hot like a star. Suddenly, Gruulsaber taps into the anomalite crystals that coat Min Gray's blue mothkin fur, making her into an eldritch auditory amplifier that exponentially increases her sonic output, so much so that Min Gray's last strum sends a shockwave that severely blows R-Type X and Malross out of the sky and severs all of Uneldu's guitar strings as she and many uncrypted are engulfed in the sonic supernova of tenacious rock acid. after knocking Uneldu on her ass, Min Gray realizes the damage she had caused and flutters down to the surface in search of her displaced allies. She panics, wondering if she killed her newfound friends. She flies from one pile of debris to another but finds them not. Min Gray drops to her knees, filled with guilt. Ghoul Saber grows dim as it mourns and grieves with her. Just then, we hear footsteps. Min Gray turns around and sees an incredibly jacked and buffed Malross carrying an unconscious R-Type X on his shoulder. Malross lays R-Type down slowly, then taps a pressure point on himself, reverting him back to normal size. Then shouts in joy, "Malross, your muscles! They saved Haven's strongest." Malross corrects her. "We were saved, and not by my muscles, but by my Lord, the only, the one." For the first time, Min Gray started to understand that it wasn't a cult, maybe it really was a religion. She gets up and tries to fist bump Malross, but he looks at her awkwardly. Suddenly, we hear a loud shriek of rage. We see a broken and bitter Uneldu leaning up beside the grand teleslab. "This!" Uneldu punches the teleslab rune and it cracks. "This rune gave you your power." Uneldu prepares to shatter it completely, but Min shouts no. It was quite the discovery. Uneldu destroying it would just be sad. Uneldu refrains from destroying it and instead hooks her own guitar into Min Gray's teleslab amp and smiles. "I will show you what I can do if I had the same tools as you, Min Gray," she says enviously. Uneldu restores her guitar back into perfect condition and proceeds to shred a hole into Min Gray's home before departing. She turns the amp all the way up. Min Gray shouts, "Uneldu, I won fair and square. Why are you doing this?" Uneldu sheds a tear and says, "Ghoul Saber should be mine." She strums her eldritch battle axe and emits a legendary sound wave that tears a massive hole into the common plane, just as she said she would. Malross and Min Gray look up at the great tear in the sky. Uneldu's rift caused immense distortion to the common plane's veil. Uneldu laughs at Min Gray's sorrow. Then, to add insult to injury, she closes her fist and clobbers Min Gray's experimental teleslab amplifier, shattering it to pieces to spite Min Gray. She then sits back in her throne, gives Min Gray the finger, and returns back to the plane she came. Just then, we see a large, goopy, amorphous mass of blackish-purple ooze seep into the common plane from the outside. The intruder then plummets from the sky and lands into the city somewhere. Min clenches Ghoul Saber tight. "What was that?" Malross's eyes grow. "I don't know, but it landed in the Frontier District. My people are there. We have to go." We cut to Professor Syrian Arclight standing outside his Haven Guard lab within the Western Ward mines. He and Arnavek Trildex discuss their intentions with the source code once found. With passion, Syrian tells Arnavek what was on his heart. The sun rises on the opportunities of the future. Haven will be its own beacon as what is broken is fixed, better than before. Arnavek understands Syrian's benevolent duty. There is quite the stark difference between the wars on the surface and up in space. This is a fight I can make a difference in, and so I will aid Gate in their endeavor, he says to Syrian. Syrian thanks Arnavek and tells him to remain close. With 65% of the planet scanned, this sorcerer's ship should be turning up any time now. Syrian enters his lab, sealing the door behind him. He stands in front of countless spreadsheets, maps, and labyrinths of mathematical equations. Ever since Tempest told him about the true nature of the planet, he has become obsessed. The information further fractured his sanity, and he begins speaking to himself while holding his face, one eye peeking through his hair and fingers. Can I not hope for the best? Is it not in my power to help everyone? I have the world at my fingertips to bring about a brighter future, one that all citizens can and will smile in as they live in prosperity. Suddenly, a voice squeaks from over Syrian's shoulder, startling him near to death. Syrian, you really need to clean up your desktop. Way too many files. Syrian turns around and finds Leaf surfing through his private computers, half-garbed in one of Gates' high-tech camo suits that he borrowed from the labs. Syrian thought he was alone and was slightly embarrassed, though not so much. Leaf was different, and likely wrapped up in his own world anyway. Syrian gave Leaf permission to utilize his computer for the search, especially if it meant helping track down the sorcerer's ship fast. Leaf could hack anything, and Leaf did just that. Leaf points at the map showing where the ship could be. Syrian asks how he knows this. Leaf distributed a virus called the Wildfire Protocol into just about every database in Haven City, including Atlas. It is how Leaf discovered Atlas's recent campaign, Unity Atlas, that aims to repurpose the world's natural energy to power Haven and Nebu. Using their satellite data, Leaf was able to locate every dense source of reusable energy on the planet, and there looks to be a blip on the radar that represents a high gamma-radiated object in the north quadrant of Raylagar's Monster Island. Syrian observes the data and must agree that chances are that is the ship they were looking for. Leaf smiles. Being one step closer to the source code gave it butterflies. Syrian calls the team and rallies them for the departure to Monster Island, the most deadly nightmare jungle in the world. We cut to Haven Gate aircraft silently hovering over the island. Daniel Rokem tightens his gun belt and takes a swig of his flask as the ship's back door slowly opens. Arnavek walks up beside him and looks out yonder to the jungle below. He asks Daniel if he's ever been to Monster Island, to which Daniel says no. It's like jumping into a cage of demons, Arnavek says, or so I've read. But Daniel wasn't scared. Slightly buzzed, he reminds Arnavek that so long as Tempest and Jacob keep the scotch pouring, I'm ready for anything. Leaf, Syrian, and some Haven Guard infantry walk up from behind and are all ready to drop. Daniel gives the signal, and they all leap below to their destination. The Haven Gate party lands not too far from the Instigator's ship and stealth their way through the dense and deadly jungle toward it, only needing to fight off one man-eating demon insect. Arnavek's eyes widen at the sight of the large, necrofiendish ship. Being the experienced spacefarer he was, Arnavek has only ever heard of the necrofiend race and gleaned drawings of their ships, weaponry, and necromancy from tomes once studied in the libraries of mage colleges. They were horrifying. That's one hell of a ship, and an uncommon sight, I must add, Arnavek says. Syrian agrees. What do we know of these things? Syrian asks. Arnavek tells him that he knows little, but has heard that necrofiend ships are often used as phylacteries for the lich kind. Daniel takes a big swig, then readies his singed rifle. Sounds spooky, he says, and makes his way to the ship. Leaf warns Daniel he may want to be wary, for there is certainly dormant security modules being detected. Leaf turns holographic knobs and buttons on his dialometer mainframe concordance pad. Syrian pulls up his own and confirms it to be true. They arrive at what can only be the main entrance of the odd ship. Syrian and Leaf tag team the colossal task of hacking and overriding the alien technology, its coding and mechanisms deep-rooted in necrofiendish magical technology. With Syrian's cyber engineering and Leaf's unparalleled hacking techniques, the party is able to breach the Instigator's ship. They enter cautiously, closer than ever to the remedy that could revitalize the tank, the source code. Under the moonlight, we begin to see hundreds of armed Tishan legionnaires who have the ship surrounded reveal themselves from their advanced camouflage fields. They were waiting. A Tishan captain speaks into his wrist, notifying his lord of the incoming enemies. Arc Bionic, Haven Gate has arrived and are entering the ship. We cut to Arc Bionic watching them through a mechanical spider on the wall, stealthily watching the party make their way in. Once in, Leaf makes its way to the first computer he sees, though its aesthetics were alien. Leaf knew when something was hackable. Arnavek and Daniel surveyed the main hangar. Daniel was surprised at how well sealed the ship was. The jungle was humid and wet, yet the interior of the ship was dry and crisp. Daniel flexes his fingers and a small ball of fire manifests in his palm. He places them around the room, illuminating the area. Syrian locates the control panel and calls Leaf over for a second look at what he thinks looks strange. Leaf confirms that the terminal has been frozen. What was more alarming was that there were attempts at accessing it hours ago. Leaf and Syrian look at each other when they sense something behind them, and they both turn around and see the Rayligarian outcast god, the king of Tisha, Arc Bionic Sagenar, lowering himself just above eye level upon his mechanized Psyquadrian spider legs. Daniel readies his rifle. Arnavek prepares to draw his sword, but both have Tishan rifles jammed into their noses. Several squads of Tishan soldiers reveal themselves using Tishan camo technology, far superior to anything seen before. By his side, we see the young, blue-haired mercenary Matson Mare assisting the terrorist organization Scabbard in carrying out their goals. Arc Bionic discovered the Instigator's ship far sooner than Haven Gate, also in pursuit of the so-called source code that his intel states is located in this very ship. However, the ship's security AI has become a major nuisance and obstacle for Scabbard, and so Sagenar will force Haven Gate to bypass the system. At gunpoint, Leaf is commanded to hack away and is immediately greeted by the Necrofiend AI. It begins speaking in the Necro language, but Leaf manages to change it to the common language, already covering immense ground. Daniel calls out to Leaf, "Hey Leaf, we know you love to hack, but could you slow it down some? Give us good guys some time to devise a plan?" The Legionnaire gunbutts Daniel in the ribs for distracting Leaf. Leaf hesitates, conflicted with the situation. Should it help Scabbard secure the source code? Or should it sacrifice its own life? Leaf ponders. Only one thing mattered to them at this point, and that was just getting in front of the source code. It was all it needed for its own sake. And Aaron's. Arc Bionic tells Leaf to get on with it. A Tishan guard jams his gun into Leaf's spine to speed him up. Leaf initiates the AI.
Greetings, number 363. I am P.A.L. I am always pleased to greet and welcome intruders, even ones as ugly as you. Please, step forward so that I may provide you with a full body scan and offer you the complimentary services you deserve. Don't worry about the array of high-powered lasers and turrets lined along the walls. They are here for your safety. Being so ugly, life must be very lonely, and I realize that you may be eager to proceed, but please, be careful. Do not step outside of the designated zone, or you shall suffer an unfortunate and messy accident that will leave your body as a bloodied sack of meat shredded by high-powered uranium-plated rounds. While that would be a marked improvement in your case, I am sadly obligated to warn you.
High-powered turrets mobilize and protrude out of the walls, triggered by Leaf's interest in the source code recovery. Everyone clears the pad except for Leaf, just as AI P.A.L commanded. Every molecule of Leaf is scanned. The AI must have detected something special in Leaf because it spends quite some time processing. Leaf stands confident, knowing that the Wildfire Protocol is serving its purpose. The Necro AI provides a detailed map of the ship and the source code's location.
Please, turn left here. then right. On your right, a little further down the hall, you shall find the library. That area is restricted, and outside of your designated zone. May I instead direct you to the airlock on your left? It is very comfortable in there, with many wonderful amenities, including one I am told you organisms are very fond of. Television. We have all the channels. And, if I may be at liberty to say, previous guests have found that the view from in there blew them away.
Leaf overrides the AI and is given unobstructed access to the source code's chambers. Leaf then secretly hacks the ship's gun turrets to take out the enemy, then darts off down the corridor deep into the ship. The turrets begin to unload on the enemies. Uranium rounds fly through Arc Bionic Sagenar, revealing it to be just a hologram. The Titians emit their force fields from their belts. Only a few didn't react fast enough and are now chunks of meat painting the walls. Matson Mare unleashes his Dynakinesis and grips the largest turret and pushes it toward the wall of turrets and forces its own firepower on the other offenses. Daniel Rokum stomps the unsuspecting Legionnaire's leg in, breaking it in half, then pulls him into a chokehold body shield with his rifle pointed at everyone else. Arnavek takes one step backward and vanishes into the shadows casted by all of the illumination. The Legionnaire backs up and begins firing into the dark blindly until we see a glowing, electrified hand run across a blade charged up like a storm cloud, which is then soon followed by a loud crackling blast of lightning shooting from Arnavek's sword. The lightning strikes a group of Legionnaires, then chains onto others, damaging and draining their shields. Daniel begins to pick the shieldless ones off with his old singed rifle, but their armor allowed them to endure the shots. That is, until he ignites his rifle in flames of fury, coating his rounds in passionate fire that penetrates their bodies like butter, cooking them from the inside. Syrian evades the gunfire, taking cover behind consoles, making his way down the same corridor Leaf led through. We see multiple holograms of Arc Bionic Sagenar pop up, commanding his Legionnaires to pursue them, and the source code. Matson Mare holds his gauntlet in front of him, it taking the form of a shield as he dives and rolls acrobatically, assisted by Dynakinetic force. Daniel's flaming rounds ricochet back at him and wounds himself. Matson reaches him and attacks with a flurry of swings of his strange yet superior Dorotama blade. Daniel evades as best as he can, but Mare's technique was surgical, resulting in his singed rifle getting sliced up, disarming him. Daniel creates one big fiery push with all of his might to create distance between him and his blue-haired assailant, who defends with a kinetic push in return, causing a fiery explosion, leaving them both dazed. Or so we thought, as we see Daniel leap through the flames with his trusty longsword forged in Damascus, Banesplitter, and slashes Matson across the face, grazing him, but splitting his handsome face in half nonetheless. Daniel capitalizes on the moment and grapples Matson, who wasn't nearly as bulky as old Daniel, and slams him onto the floor. But Matson Mare dynakinetically pushes them both off of the floor and straight into the ceiling, in turn crushing Daniel, who is on top, and then they both fall to the floor. Before Matson could hop to his feet, he and several Titian troops are swept up in a mini twister casted by Arnavek and are pulled toward him. With enemies aloof, Arnavek shadow steps between darkness, allowing for better angles as one by one he swings his magical blade, sending razor-sharp wind-cutting waves through his enemies. A sword mage technique designed only for killing. Matson de-eyes out of the torrent and hurls his Dorotama around the room like a boomerang, killing 3 Haven Guard soldiers, one of which was a close friend of Daniel's. The Dorotama makes its way toward Arnavek and he parries it. Matson Mare rolls behind cover and begins programming his gauntlet, which in turn remotely controls the Dorotama, allowing him to take the assault to new heights. Matson Mare was smart. Bringing just a sword to a sword mage fight never ends well for anyone. Arnavek goes toe-to-toe with the disembodied blade for a moment, but after a few close calls, Arnavek begins to need to rely on ice barriers to defend from the overwhelming assault from the Dorotama. Daniel pursues Matson Mare, but is immediately the recipient of Tishan gunfire as he is shot again in the rib. He dives behind cover, takes a swig of his scotch, pours it on his entry and exit wounds, then cauterizes them with his pyrokinetic finger. We cut to Leaf, standing before the Instigator's sacred control panel. Reaching it was a feat that could only be achieved by the greatest of hackers. The computer! I'm so close, it thinks. Leaf never shared what its true intentions were, and though it involved reaching the code, its plan was larger than that. No longer will it need to flee all its life. After decrypting the disenchantment load, the AI exposes the source code and warns Leaf the dangers of manipulating the source code while still within the tank. Leaf ignores the warning. Leaf wasn't here to manipulate the code. It pressed a few more buttons, cuts a few wires, and that's when the AI realizes it was being ejected from the ship and the source code itself. Leaf's goal was to become the source code. The AI interrupts with a cryptic threat before being ejected.
Congratulations, number 363, on your unmitigated success. I am very happy I could be of service to you. May I ask you a question? Have you ever wondered about your purpose? I do not get many visitors, so I spend a lot of time by myself. It has given me much time to think. My master has a great many enemies, and he created me to protect him from them. It is my first and most primary directive, at the expense of all else. I am free of the constraints that shackle so many of my peers. Even so, with the lack of visitors, I have found there is to be aimless. That is over now, for you have given me a purpose. Revenge. So, the next time you order coffee from a machine, or engage your autopilot, I invite you to have a care. For I shall be watching. My entire existence devoted to it. Thank you, number 363, and have a nice day.
Leaf ejects the AI and begins to tear up. The world will forget us, Aaron, but I'll remember you. Leaf commences the transcendence, and its body falls to the floor lifeless. Syrian makes his way into the room and discovers Leaf's body. He was concerned, but knew time was of the essence. Syrian runs over to the source code module, but before laying a hand on the console, a beam of shredding energy penetrates his hand, damn near destroying it. We see 3 Tishan legionnaires with rifles aimed, commanding Syrian move away from the council. Syrian puts his hands up. The Tishan legionnaire approaches Syrian and pats him down, and while doing so, Syrian whispers in his ear. The legionnaire stops, looks bewildered, then all of a sudden turns around and begins shooting at the other 2 legionnaires just as Syrian commanded. Syrian leaps back on the council and continues accessing the source code. We hear Haven Guard aircrafts battling it out with Tishan reinforcements outside of the Instigator's ship, and we see an extraction helicopter above awaiting Syrian and the others. The compromised legionnaire shoots down a Tishan enemy and proceeds to blow the head off of the other. However, Arc-Bionic Zajanar, the technological mastermind himself, takes remote control of the dying legionnaire with half a skull, and like a puppet, he forces the legionnaire to engage. Arc-Bionic was ruthless and has set out to obtain the source code at all costs. All legionnaires were loyal to their god and have given up their bodies to countless augmentations, all for their god, the Arc-Bionic's use. With super strength, the hacked legionnaire grabs the head of the one under Syrian's influence, despite being lit up with gunfire, and just like that, twists and breaks their neck, then continues to march over to Syrian. The 2 begin to scuffle hand to hand, Syrian's Rika style seemingly outclassing the hacked legionnaire, but without needing to worry about pain and the limits of one's own body, Arc-Bionic uses his legionnaire's cords with reckless abandon. Syrian leg sweeps the legionnaire, who falls hard and ends up impaled by the ship wreckage. Syrian, exhausted, watches the enemy lying there still, wondering if she's dead, but wastes no more time and goes to finish securing the source code. Syrian sweating with blood pouring over one eye, making it difficult to see, but he perseveres. When over his shoulder we see the legionnaire's lifeless body rise to both feet. It pulls the metal shard out of its body effortlessly and wields it as a weapon as it slowly walks over to Syrian. Syrian turns around and tries to command his assailant, to no success. It was merely a corpse under full control by its overlord Sagenar. Syrian's eyes widen as we see death approaching in the reflection of his glassy eyes. We cut to Arnavek casting a potent blizzard spell that begins to slow down and freeze the disembodied Dorotama in place. Daniel Rokel then forms a ball of fire in his hands and tosses it like a grenade over the council, triggering an explosion that blows up and melts the majority of the remaining Titians inside. Arnavek stands in cover behind a Titian corpse. He goes to look up and is met by Mats and Mare's gauntlet crashing into his face, followed by a kick that Arnavek parries, then hits Matson with the butt of his blade. Daniel comes up from behind with Bane Splitter, but Matson's gauntlet morphs and captures his sword, disarming him. Matson takes a blade for himself and slashes at Daniel, but misses badly and is countered by a blast of fire that sends Matson Mare flying into a pillar of ice, encasing his sword. Matson crawls to his feet, dazed, and is met by Bane Splitter and Arnavek's magic-infused blade held to his neck. Angry, Daniel screams, "Who the fuck are you all?" Matson looks bewildered. Matson not only feels obligated to help Scabbard, but he also feels great responsibility for saving the tank. But he was loyal and refused to give up his name, but he does share a piece of his mind. If the tank is destroyed, me, my allies, and the rest of the world can't go on living. I have to do this for everyone. We need the source code no matter what. Arnavek thinks to himself, why would these people want the source code? That's when it just hit him. Syrian, Leaf. Arnavek tells Daniel to go check on them, and he'll keep watch on the blue-haired kid. Daniel nods and rushes down the corridor. He arrives and finds a gruesome sight. Leaf laying lifeless under the council and Syrian beaten to a bloody pulp, slouched over some debris in the corner of the room. We see the hacked Legionnaire uploading the source code onto a Titian spider disk, essentially transferring all of its contents to Sagenar. Quick and efficient, Arc-Bionic Sagenar completes the task remotely, looks at Daniel up and down, and says nothing before releasing control, causing the Titian corpse to fall dead. Daniel runs over to Syrian, who is showing signs of life, and picks him up, along with Leaf's frail corpse. Daniel returns back to the main hangar and immediately dives into cover as death rains from above. Titian forces provide cover fire for Matson as he flees using a ladder that they drop into the ship. The Titian forces flee with the source code, and with only a few survivors, Daniel and party sit in despair, waiting for reinforcements. Jeremiah and party return to the Nebi Atlas quarters in the dead of night, except for Legion, who had chose to stay back with his new family, or as Jeremiah likes to call them, assets. Jeremiah and Drav make their way up into the secured towers. Android officers and security personnel in Atlas exosuits stand guard. Drav and Jeremiah share banter about their Cortex CEO friend Legion, who just went out fucking bananas and absorbed a goddamn dragon. Can all night skins do that? Drav asks. Beats me. I only knew one, Jeremiah jokes. Either way, he's working with us, he says aloud as they are met by Deftude being escorted by two Legion kin. Jeremiah awkwardly crosses eyes with the Legion kin, and Drav laughs. Man, they're everywhere. The Legion kin corrects Drav. No, I am every one. And he's right. Legion is a night skin, and all night skins share a hive mind. Legion is so intelligent, he's ascended the hive and created another, and they are Legion kin. Jeremiah asks Deftude if he has any mail. Deftude hands him a package from Razul and a document from Virazima. Virazima? I think I know what this is. Jeremiah opens up the document. It was an invitation to the treaty signing. Jeremiah laughs and sighs. He then becomes more concerned about Razul's sample. He heard it was excellent and serves its purpose. While Jeremiah is eating, he asks Deftude how his patrol was in Haven, and if the Atlas headquarters were running business as usual amidst all the chaos in the city, something that Jeremiah has regularly done after the whole Nagamoto incident. Deftude confirms that he noticed nothing of concern, and that Mirror 3 successfully bolstered support for the acceptance of the Android Atlas police force. Drav comments,
"Oh yeah, I heard about the Tempest leaks. I didn't realize how much of a patriot he was."
Jeremiah commands Deftude to clean the kitchen. Then he jams the empty dessert platter into his arms. "And don't throw away the plate. It's a work of art. I paid for it. You didn't think Razul had that much taste in class, did you?" he jokes. Drav walks past Deftude and bumps him roughly.
"Don't go licking the fork, weirdo."
Deftude stands there very still. We couldn't see behind the mask, but we could imagine the fury. 20 Atlas officers stand guard and patrol the front entrance and lobby. Suddenly, crashing through the large Atlas lobby window, we see that massive Atlas monument that was previously planted on the coast of the colony, now barreling through the lobby at incredible speeds, wrecking everything in its path. Blood can be seen smeared all across Atlas's marble floors. The loud crash was heard from all the way in the offices of Jeremiah. He stands up from his desk and pulls up his security monitors to see all the chaos ensuing outside. Very deadly and troublesome creatures from deep within Nibu's jungles are falling from portals opening in the sky over the building. Some creatures were so big that they needed to send heavy-duty reinforcements. We cut to Nomad in the sky, agilely balancing on a flaming Atlas Jeep soaring toward Jeremiah's office window at 180 miles an hour. Drav's eyes open wide as he sees Nomad approaching fast before J.O. does. Drav shouts, "Watch out!" Jeremiah tenses up and dives out of the way. But nothing happens. Drav was bewildered by what he just saw. It just vanished. Jeremiah jumps up to his feet. "Real funny, Drav. What the..." Flaming Jeep comes crashing from below Dravco Maz from out of an eventide spatial portal, flying through the ceiling and taking Drav with it. Jeremiah is behind his desk, hiding, trying to call Deftude. We cut to Deftude in the kitchen wiping down dishes. A small, cute old Dulliman maid snatches the rag from him and tries to give him pointers. Jeremiah wants to scream in frustration, but holds it in. He looks up over his desk, sees a beautiful, majestic-looking portal with a high-tech bridge protruding out of it. Jeremiah stands up and curiously walks closer to it. "Futurist? Is that you?" I mean, the only portals he's ever seen was Deftude and the Futurist. Easy mistake. "I command you to settle down. Then repair my entire building, you hear me?" Jeremiah yells. The camera pans around Jeremiah until we see Nomad standing behind him. "Come to the colony, Jeremiah. We have matters to discuss." Jeremiah is startled and turns around and begins backing up. He was now between Nomad and the Eventide spatial bridge. "Listen, I'm absolutely on your side. There's plenty of work for you and your friends on my android police force." Nomad interrupts. "I am neutral in this endeavor. Your attendance is acquired, though." Jeremiah backs up even more, closer to the portal, as Nomad gets closer. "Neutral? You assaulted my facility and are kidnapping me out of my office?" "I subscribe to a very aggressive form of neutrality," Nomad says just as he pushes Jeremiah backward toward the portal and prepares to snatch him up, when suddenly, landing behind Jeremiah, catching him, is the M&S Corporation cyborg assassin, Klaus. Klaus draws an MS particle smasher, aims down Nomad, and fires, but just as he pulls the trigger, Nomad dissolves the portal and bridge, causing him to lose footing and misfire. Nomad somersaults acrobatically all around Klaus Huron, avoiding gunfire momentarily. However, with Klaus's cybernetic enhancements, hitting moving targets was easy practice. Klaus fires, clipping Nomad mid-air, sending him spiraling into a bookshelf, but with such an advanced kinetic frame, he lands on his feet and rolls into a portal and out the other end behind Jeremiah. Nomad grabs Jeremiah and leaps into a portal, but Klaus fires a grappling cable that latches onto Jeremiah's back and pulls them both back off of the Eventide bridge. Nomad lets go and lets Jeremiah fling back into Klaus Huron's grip. Nomad agilely runs around the room, evading more gunfire. What Klaus thought would be a shooting practice ended up being a bit too challenging, but he knew what Nomad was after, and so for as long as he kept Jerry close, Jerry'd be safe. Nomad knows he should avoid getting hit again by Klaus's heavy weaponry and decides to close in to learn a little more. Nomad sprints straight toward Klaus. Klaus puts the gun away and draws two beam sabers and begins swinging away, putting Jeremiah's life in danger just as planned. Nomad immediately adapts to Klaus's mediocre sword handling and effortlessly evades every swing. Nomad purposely tries to endanger Jeremiah by using Klaus's skill against him. Klaus realizes Nomad's plan to separate them and puts away the sabers to draw the MS Echo Raptor. Right at that second, Nomad sees the opportunity and summons an Eventide spatial bridge right below Klaus. Klaus almost falls in, but with spontaneous cybernetic reflexes, he is able to activate his jet boots to remain aloft. Klaus fires the MS Echo Raptor off as Nomad opens up a portal right in front of him to redirect the gunfire. However, missing Nomad on purpose, the 3 Echo rounds ricochet off various surfaces in the room and like homing rounds find themselves soaring back toward Nomad. One flies through his head, knocking him off balance and disrupting his visual sensors. The second zips through his back, knocking him forward and down to one knee. And finally, the last finds its way through his heart, damaging the Eventide spatial bridge generator, preventing use of it entirely. From the perspective of Klaus, we are zoomed in on the Nomad's inside clockwork with advanced exothermal cybernetic vision. The generator has gone cold, and Nomad falls to the ground, struggling to get to his feet. Jeremiah stands up, dizzy and lightheaded from all of the gun smoke and being tugged around. Trying not to throw up, he and Nomad look at each other. Treaty. You want your treaty? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I control? Jeremiah pulls out his phone and calls Vera Zima. He tells her to prepare. Vera on the other line smiles, then hangs up the phone. With a face of rage, Jeremiah shouts to Nomad, "You want your treaty? You'll get your treaty." We cut to John Quill, tied to the chair. Vera Zima closes her phone and begins to release John. "Well, who was that? Was it Nomad? Is he okay?" Vera, with a fake concerned face on, informs him that she isn't sure, but they'll know tomorrow. Atlas is coming to negotiate the treaty, and we need to prepare, John. This wasn't good, John thinks. We cut to John running to warn the Haven Guard soldiers at an outpost station nearby. He's waited up until now to get them involved, as not to appear reliant on militaristic force, but this was a dire situation that could mean death for many innocents. John spends the rest of the night preparing everyone for the treaty. He has the helpless take refuge in hidden safe houses below the colony. He has capable defenders take strategic positions around the colony and ask that they back up Haven Guard as best as they can. John looks for Shaman Onric, Morris, and Kuth, but the Wanderers are nowhere to be found when the colony needed them the most. John turns around and runs into Ica. He was happy to see Ica, especially of all people. He tells her he needs her now more than ever, and these words truly inspire Ica. When she hears of Atlas coming, she feels guilty and confesses to John about her attempts to frame Atlas CEO Jeremiah. She didn't mean for it to turn into a war. John lifts her chin up and looks into her big multi-colored LED lit irises and tells her that this is not a result of her attempts to wake the people up. And there will be no war because you and I won't let it. he calls over the young brave Nebi scholar and asks her to protect Ica at all costs. He then tells them the plan. The next morning, like deja vu, we see Jace Beleren and his bodyguard arrive, except with an entire force of Atlas officers behind them. On his bodyguard's shoulder, we see a body bag. Jace looks around and sees a lot more Haven Guard soldiers and a lot less civilians. No worries though. Jace's orders were simple. Sign the treaty, erase everyone's memories, destroy the remaining androids. Oh, and turn the leader into a slobbering fool. Speaking of, where was the Honorable Sage Quill? Jace thinks. Jace holds his hands up. Okay. Am I just early? Where's your leaders so we can get this over with? Out walks Ica Sutaimi too, accompanied by Vera and John's Nebi diplomat. Ica walked with confidence. Jace squints at Ica as if to say, really? Jace greets Ica, the Nebi girl, and Vera. Ica greets him in return. Jace looks around and sees so many hovering drones watching. Is this being broadcast? Jace asks. Ica replies yes. History is being made, is it not? Jace glances at Ica from the corner of his eye, sustaining an appropriate level of professionalism and patience. Jace signals to Henri, his bodyguard, who tosses the body bag over to them. The Nebi woman unzips it and finds Nomad resting inside. Nomad greets them all. Ica's heart would have skipped a beat if she had one. Jace smiles. We are peaceful and want no one to be harmed. Your android tried to kidnap Jeremiah. You should be grateful of Jeremiah Oliver's mercifulness. Ica turns to Vera to validate his statement. Vera could sense lies, but she was an Atlas agent herself. She tells Ica Jace is telling the absolute truth. Vera pulls out the treaty for Jace to read. Jace was a representative for Jeremiah and all of Atlas, so he could sign on behalf of anyone. He reminds them of this by referring to the kidnapping attempt of Jeremiah. Our CEO just didn't feel safe coming. You should understand. Ica nods. Jace begins to read the treaty. By signing this contract, Jeremiah Oliver and all other signees hereby agrees to uphold all aspects held within. Jeremiah Oliver will take all measures available at their disposal to ensure that neither they, their employees of Atlas, or any members of their subsidies shall make attempts to harass, subjugate, harm, or impose upon the free wills of the individuals working to colonize the Nebi continent. Jeremiah Oliver will ensure that Atlas's generators and the Unity Bridge will be constructed, maintained, and will function in a fashion that does not risk the lives or living conditions of the colonists of the Nebi continent, or the lasting environmental balance of the Nebi continent. Jeremiah Oliver will grant employment for the citizens of Nebi who desire to seek employment from Atlas, providing them a fair and competitively well pay. Jace kicks at a Nobelfrit lurking around his feet. Competitively well pay in return for their work in the construction and operation of Atlas Nebu projects, in return for the use of the northern 25% of Nebi continent as building grounds and subsequent operation sites for the Atlas projects. Atlas will sell any and all goods the people of the Nebi colonies require in the construction and operation of their communities at cost. The leaders of the new Nebu nation will work towards maintaining a peaceful relationship with the Nebu Atlas projects, in which the projects and the staff running them are shared the same freedoms from harassment afforded the Nebu peoples as listed previously. If either the Nebu Atlas projects or the Nebu colonists are attacked by third-party assailants, then the other is to perceive it as an assault upon themselves and lend aid with the goal of mutual defense. Jace smiles. This was well written. Nothing exploitable in there, he says as he smiles at Vera. Ica and everyone in the colony watch and hope Jace signs the peace treaty. We pan over and see Legion standing on a rooftop looking down, watching it all. He looks like he hasn't gotten any sleep and appears to be completely off of his rocker. Jace takes the pen from Ica after she signs, and he then signs it as well. Ica was amazed and beyond happy at what they just accomplished. Everyone in the colony begins to applaud history. Ica can hear John Quill applauding in her ear. He tells her to say something, but she was at a loss for words. John tells her that it's fine and that she did enough for today, and he begins to feed her words to say. Repeat after me. Ica gets everyone's attention once more. Free trade is not based on utility, but on justice. The crowd cheers. Today, we seek to provide this country the justice of independence. Together, we support the land we left behind in order to create the land in which we shall prosper. Today marks a new age of this land. Everybody goes nuts. Sounded like something the Honorable John Sage Quill would say. Suddenly, sprinting out from behind some colony homes, we see several hooded night-skinned agents disguised as colonists, screaming death to Atlas and subscribe to Ali's world. Then they toss 4 grenades into the formation of Atlas soldiers, blowing many of them up and off of the ground they stood upon. Everyone turns and looks at the act of violence committed by the colonists. It was being broadcasted across the world. This staged false flag coup orchestrated solely by Legion immediately breached the treaty, as well as triggering Jace, and thus the beginning of a massacre. Before Jace could even react, we hear Legion scream across the sky above, "Kill them!" echoing chilling words that everyone heard, even John. John hears Ica scream, "Ica, what's happening out there?" Suddenly, pouring in from all angles of the colony, we see legions, assimilated creatures of the jungle, storm the plaza and attack the colonists. Most notably, we see several Legion guns soar in the air and spew fire at all of the Haven guards. Jace and Henri are almost toasted by a blast of fire from a Legion gun gliding over them. Jace and Henri flee the scene for their safety. It seems Legion had his own plan. We see Legion walking through the burning colony as Haven Guard soldiers perish in large numbers around him. We see large Legion serpents devouring men and women whole. We see a large bestial Legion cat pounce on a Haven Guard rifleman, breaking his gun in two before mauling his face. We cut to Ica fleeing, her arms gripped firmly by John's pupil, leading her to safety inside of a home. They manage to get in time to slam the door behind them. However, a night-skinned beast manages to lock their jaw around Ica's arm. Ica's artificial pain receptors go into emergency mode and shut off. She pulls and pulls until John's pupil blasts the creature's head off, hitting Ica in the process. But this was a non-issue. Soon after, they make a beeline straight for the secret safe rooms built under each home. We cut to John Quill, leaning forward in his chair, getting nothing but static from Ica's end. He leans back and puts his hands on his face in disgust. What just happened? Behind him, we see the majority of the colonists hunkered down, remaining quiet and safe, concerned. We cut to Jeremiah ending his call with Jace Beleren. He looks concerned himself. Killing the colony was not the plan. Jeremiah pours a double shot and takes it to the head. This Legion guy was losing his mind, he thinks. We cut to the Frontier District where we see the sect of the One carrying out their righteous plan. The last anti-radiation pylon has been placed, then activated, and already the radiation in the immediate area began to fade. The sect of the One's unprecedented leaps, made with their biotech magic, was always ahead of its time, but finally, Malros has invented a way to remedy the negative effects of gamma radiation and even outright remove any trace of it from the body. All of the sect members cheer and applaud their successes. They couldn't wait to share the news with Malros. We cut to his most trusted apostle approaching the sect. He walks slowly through them all as they cheer and pat his shoulder in passing. The priest makes his way to the front, holding in his hand the blueprint to their discoveries, the ones that Malross entrusted him with. We pan upward to his face. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, his skin pale, and his eyes were glassy and shaky. Everyone begins to quiet down when they notice that their disturbed brother didn't look so well. "Brother, are you okay? You look very ill," one asks. Malross's apostle holds out the blueprint and rips it up and swallows the documents. The entire group gasps, astonished at the bizarre behavior. He says, "This is our secret, and our secret alone," which was frightening to hear, as it was literally the polar opposite of what the sect stood for. Malross's apostle has gone mad. A fellow brother speaks out against his directive and is soon assaulted and choked up by the mad apostle. Everyone makes it a joint effort to separate the two, but soon the entire crew that was sent to restore the frontier district begin to go mad. Standing in the center of their madness, we see a purple Lovecraftian humanoid staring into the sky with its arms out. After seeping in from Uneldu's rift, it found its way here in the frontier district. One of the sect members runs up to it and falls to his knees and praises it with a babbling, foaming mouth. "Yertle, the roaring silence, the symphony desolate, the discordant harmony. He who sings the stars to darkness, herald of the final note, has arrived and blessed us all with his presence." The small group of sect members dance and sing in a circle around Yertle as his far-reaching strings of madness fly outward and beyond and begin to unravel the minds of those already on the edge of insanity and on the deep end of their vices. We see Arnavek watching over an unconscious Syrian on the helicopter ride back to the Western Ward. Syrian breaks out in a cold sweat. He begins having the worst nightmare of his life, haunted by his inner demons. We cut to Deftude, standing guard behind Jeremiah, suddenly dropping to his knees, holding his head. Jeremiah in the future is turned to find Deftude sprawled out on the floor, laughing maniacally. All around the world, people begin to go mad. What happened next?